All right, good evening, everybody. If we can take our seats. Good evening. Welcome to the October 3rd Forsyth County Board of Commissioners regular meeting and public hearings. At this time, I'd like to call us to order at 5:02 p.m. And we do not have anyone here from the community to lead us in the invocation and pledge tonight. Cindy Mills, would you mind? Thank you. Please stand as you're able.
Let us pray. Thank you, dear Lord, for today. Thank you, God, for your many blessings that you give us, Lord. Help us, God, to be mindful of those in need. Help us to be mindful of all that you give us. And, God, help us to be good stewards of those things that you give. Help us, God, to place priorities for our public servants, for our public safety, for our county employees, and for the children that live in this community. Help us, God, to just always be thankful and to spend your money wisely, God, and to look after our taxpayers in the best way we can. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. All right, I'm going to start with Commissioner Brown this evening. Do you have any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I have none.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills?
Hold on. I don't have it marked.
Is it old business or public hearing number 5? The Red Oak sanitation one?
That one is 1 month.
Okay. And what's the record, or what's the date on that for the record? We'll be putting us out to November the 7th. Is that correct?
Hang on 1 second. You said it's old business?
No, I'm sorry. It's public hearing number 5.
All right. And that's November 7th?
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye, or please press your green button. If you're opposed, push the red.
Please
From one
vote.
room to the next, I get a little off there. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
And then, Ken, are you doing Georgia Stone? Or?
I was going to recommend another postponement to the first public hearing in November.
All right, and what number is it?
That is old business number 2, I believe.
All right, so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries, and the item number 2 has been postponed until November. You said November 7th again?
No, how far did you say out?
The first regular meeting in November.
November
That would be
7th, that's
That would be
correct.
that date. Thank you very much.
Then one more item on the consent agenda. Item number R.
Right. So to the extent that the Board of Commissioners wants to remove item number R and discuss it, our rules require just a motion and a second, not even a vote, and that would move it to the new business agenda, should you wish to do that.
So moved.
Second.
There's no requirement for a vote. That's enough to take it
Okay,
off.
we have that motion to remove item R and place it on the agenda. Ken, would that go under old business or new business? Old business?
Yes, since that was discussed at the work session, this is its first sort of presentation at the big meeting, the regular meeting. That would go on new business, Madam Chair.
On new business?
Yes, ma'am.
6.
Okay, as number 6.
Is there a new business on here?
Oh, I'll make that a change real quickly here. And Commissioner Mills, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Cooper, did you have any changes?
I do. I would like to, we go ahead and have the public hearing tonight, but to postpone any voting or judgment on public hearing number 2 regarding the ordinance 73, which is on soil erosion and sediment control.
Okay, so just to be clear, that's going to come back to us at a later date, right?
Come back to us at a later date, yes.
Okay, and that was...
And I'm looking at the later date being November 21st. give us plenty of time.
Do you want to see it come back as old business or see it come back as public hearing, and maybe want to kind of poll each other and see if each person would like to see back as public hearing or old business?
Same with the tree.
Right, but when it comes back, it would normally come back to us as old business, and there would not be another public hearing.
We should
So
do
do
a
you
public
wish-
hearing.
I think we
That's
need
what-
another.
We
And that's
should do
what,
a
I want to
public
make sure that the board is all together
Yes.
on
Yes,
that.
then we
So
will
you would
do
like
the
to see that back as public hearing?
Yes.
Yes, on November 21st.
November 21st?
Yes.
Before we
Okay.
vote on that, I do know our consultant won't be able to be here on the 21st.
We are aware.
Okay.
All right, so my second was for postponement for November 22nd to a public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And just to reiterate, we are going to be hearing the item tonight. We're just not going to be taking action.
Want to make sure everybody's heard.
All right, did you have another change?
That was November 21st.
Are we going to move the
Correct.
tree ordinance with
I
it?
think he said 22nd.
That was what I would assume. Well, you have to do them one at a time. So we will do the same. Do you have the same motion then
I so moved.
for item number 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to take the same action, which is to bring it back for public hearing and do only the public hearing this evening. Please vote. Postpone decision, got it. So once again, we will be hearing those items. Commissioner Cooper, did you have any other changes?
Madam Chair, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Levent, you wanted to make some changes in the order?
I do, because I have to leave somewhere around 7 to 7:15. I'm going to ask the board's consideration to move my items to be behind public hearing items.
Okay, you do have one public hearing, that's public hearing number 4.
We'll leave that where it is.
Okay.
And old business, I'm hoping that's okay. Ken, if I leave old business number 1 where it is and we run out of time, are we allowed to move it later in the meeting?
Yes, and the reason I think so is because you have announced at the beginning of the meeting your intention to do that. We've done that before. Where I get concerned is if people think it's going to be at some fixed spot and then leave and then miss it. But if we're telling people, you need to go ahead and stay, because if we get to a certain place in the agenda and you have to go, we're going to move it up, and we've announced that with all the gallery here, I'm okay with that.
Yes, and my items that are landing in my district tonight are public hearing number 4, old business number 1, and I have administrative hearing as well, and I believe that is number
1.
1. So I do not need to move that, especially administrative hearing just yet, because that's the one I'm probably most likely going to have to move at some point.
Why don't
You
we
know-
just go
Okay.
ahead and move them? Because,
That's the easiest way. That's
Okay.
the best for finality.
I'm going to make a motion to move administrative hearing number 1 right behind old business number 1.
Second.
we have a motion and a second, please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Do you want to now move both of those behind your public hearing?
Yeah, then
Number
make a
4?
motion to move old business number 1 in the administrative hearing that follows it, right behind public hearing number 4.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, please vote. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
You're welcome. Any other changes? All righty. Mr. Johnson, do you have any changes from the county manager's office?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to add an item to new business that would be titled Board Authorization for a Purchase Order to T.Y. Lin in an amount not to exceed $14,850 for design services for the Post Road, Pittman Road intersection.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, please vote. That carries with a vote of 5-0 to be added as new business number 7.
And board members, and just for purposes of perfecting the record, I think there is some time sensitivity to that based upon just some of the repeated discussions about Post Road.
Yes,
getting that
Commissioners,
done.
this would facilitate the signalization of that intersection in cooperation with GDOT as soon as
So
possible.
just to confuse things a little bit, you move that as to new business number 7? Since that's my
Want
district?
that to be right behind your
Yes.
administrative hearing?
Yes, so I'm going to make a motion now to move old business number 7 that was just set to be
New
right
business- new bu-
behind my
new bu- New
administrative.
business number 7.
New business number
Yeah.
7, move it right behind the administration hearing number 1.
All right. We have a motion, please, and a second, please vote. So just for clarity's sake, I'm going to read the order of those items pertaining to District 3 will be heard as public hearing number 4. Old business, was it number 1? I didn't write the number next to it.
Yes.
Old business number 1 and administrative hearing number 1 and new
Yes.
business number 7
Yes.
will all be heard after the already placed public hearing number 4.
Yes.
Okey doke. Anything else from the county manager?
Yes, Commissioners, if you would look at item 3I, I don't know if there's any concern with this item moving forward at this time. It's an award of an RFP to Pond and Company in the amount of $49,915 for master planning for the Sony Mountain Preserve Phase 4.
It's on consent, yes.
That might be an item
I-
that you want to pull and consider at your work
I-
session
I-
next week.
I think we might want to put that off till next work session to review that again, revisit that one.
Then if the board wants to take it off and not discuss it tonight, a motion second and vote to place it directly on a work session would be in order.
So moved.
We have motion and second. That motion carries with a vote of 5-0. All right. And
That's-
anything else? That's
that's all
it?
for me.
Thank you. Tim Merritt. Mr. Merritt, is he with us? He's not with us yet. Okay, and Counselor?
I have no changes, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 5-0. And we will go on into our announcements and reports, which we don't have any. Although I do want to say that there was a wonderful event the other evening, and next year, please look for it on your calendar. There was a Back the Blue ceremony that was held to recognize our law enforcement officers and in general in first responders, and it was a really lovely evening over at McDonald & Son, so please look for that next year. And at this time, Karen is going to read the rules of the meeting and announce the public comment speakers. And this is on general subject matter, not any one particular agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the board. I'd like to take a moment to review the meeting procedures. We ask that you please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Those who would like to speak during public comments should complete a public comment form that is just available outside this room. Information regarding specific requirements to address the board is listed at the podium. Please state this information prior to speaking. All comments should be directed to the entire board and not to a particular commissioner. There are 2 public comment opportunities during the meeting for speakers to make a verbal presentation to the board, one now and one prior to old business. The number of speakers is limited to 10 now and 10 at the second portion. Speakers are selected on a first-come basis and are heard in the order in which they signed up, with the exception that Forsyth County residents will be heard first, with non-county residents to follow until the allotted time has expired. We have 1 public comment speaker signed up this evening, and that would be Patrick Foster.
Hi, I'm Patrick Foster. I live in Rascarity community down in South Forsyth, and I just wanted to say a couple of things about the proposed tree ordinance changes that are on the agenda today. I think that one of the single most important changes that can be improved would be to provide more resources for the county arborists so that new ordinances may be implemented and enforced. I've been involved in many zonings over the last 27 years here. And one of the biggest problems I've observed is that the regulations just aren't followed because the county doesn't seem to have the staff or resources to monitor many of the developments. Quite often I'm the one myself that's calling code enforcement when I see something. The tree ordinance is an integral part of the planning process, yet we only have 1 person handling that department. Additional arborist staff could help monitor the development process and possibly bring in revenue from those developers that don't want to follow the rules. So far, the Tree Commission has been fairly ineffective, probably because the county is relying on experts on the subject to volunteer their time for a job that the county really should be doing. Forsyth County has increased in population over 50,000 people in the last 10 years since 2009. Don't you think it's time that the county expand the arborist department to keep pace with the tremendous growth that Forsyth County has been experiencing over the last 10 years? Our arborist, Greg Wallace, stated at the last meeting that he thought the proposed tree ordinance changes still needed some refinement before being approved, yet I have not seen any changes made since that last meeting. Plus the fact that our arborist is not here today, and I was just thinking that maybe we need to have a third public hearing since there still seems to be some details to be ironed out. The polls, the surveys, and the comments, and the petition that we have conducted over the last year indicate that the majority of residents in Forsyth County support smart growth of Forsyth County's recommendations. So we just want to make sure that enough time is spent on the tree ordinance to make sure it's as effective as possible. So thanks very much for giving me this opportunity to talk. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have no additional speakers signed up. If anyone would like to address the board, please come forward at this time. Madam Chair, I see none.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the work session of September 4th, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting and public hearings of September 19th,
So moved.
2019?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That also carries with a vote of 5-0. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the work session and executive session of September 24th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That carries 5-0. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that also carries with a vote of 5-0 with the aforementioned changes. All right, as we go into public hearings, Karen is going to announce again the rules of the meeting and the rules for speaking during a public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the public hearings portion of our meeting, each side, those in opposition and those in support, are allotted 10 minutes to speak. Those who wish to speak should complete a public hearing form, which is available just outside this room. Please fill out both sides and submit your form to the clerk when approaching the podium to speak. If there is more than one speaker for each side, the available time will be divided among the speakers, and we will provide a reminder when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we are open with a vote of 5-0. If you are here to speak, and this gets a little complicated in some of these ordinance meetings, and my instructions have been that we still have to maintain the pro and con time periods, but we will assume that you're here just to speak to the ordinance regardless of whether you come during the pro or the con side. Don't feel like you're picking a...
Are they doing the presentation
Ma-
first?
Do you want to do the presentation first?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I opened the public hearing without it getting, I jumped the gun on that. So sorry. Let me suspend calling the speakers up at this time, and we'll go ahead and take that presentation.
Right. Even though the public hearing has been open, the timing will not commence until a speaker
Right, until we
comes up.
call the first speaker. I was ready to open that baby up.
Thank you. Good evening. The presentation is fairly brief this evening, but we do want to take a few moments just to place this within context, as well as talk about some of the issues that were discussed at the last commission meeting and a few potential ways to address those concerns. So one, as a reminder to everyone, this effort over the last year or so was an opportunity to look at the tree ordinance, the soil erosion and sediment control, and look at a series of low-impact stormwater incentives. All three of these were recommendations that came out of the county's last comprehensive plan update and part of the work program for the county to look at ways to enhance its requirements and ordinances to create better lasting, more sustainable development over the coming years. So last month we went through a much longer piece, boiled it down to one slide basically in terms of what's happened to the ordinance. Section 1, purpose and definitions. The definitions have been significantly updated and altered based on the direction of the plan and the public input. Article 2, the applicability and permitting section, underwent the greatest amount of change in terms of reordering the article, clarifying the exemptions, integrating the appendix information all in one place, and improving the flow of the ordinance to enhance use, understanding, comprehension, and application of the standards. We are modifying the required tree information and permit procedures, information at the zoning stage, and data during the permit procedures. It's actually taking a requirement that is already in the ordinance today and clearly stating it as part of the land disturbance permit procedures. We are adding and strengthening the criteria to preserve for replacement trees. We are increasing the protections and recompense for the removal of significant trees, which is one of the greatest emphasis of the tree ordinance, is to protect our significant trees as well as tree groupings within the county. And we have increased the contributions for alternative compliance and revised some of the buffer and location requirements for commercial and industrial uses. Article 3 is information on methods and technical standards, largely that are already in the ordinance, but positioned in one location for ease of use. The enforcement procedures are moved from Article 3 to Article 4, and the Tree Protection Commission is retained, but moved from Article 4 to Article 5. So that's a little bit about the order of the ordinance. At the September 5th Board of Commissioners meeting, at that time, there were two major items that came up to be addressed by our team over the last month. One has to do with Section 2.9, Special Requirements, Article 4 on page 21, where there was significant discussion about the requirements for removal of significant trees from single-family lots within major subdivisions. What was added to the ordinance was a permit process, and there was a recompense component. Based on the discussion that we heard in September, there was not a lot of support for those items. Those can be modified or easily removed from the ordinance by striking Section 2.9, Article 4. There were also some questions related to the definition and the transparency of the tree replacement fund. We did go through the ordinance and are recommending a singular term of tree replacement fund. I believe there was basically a Scribner's error in Section 3.4 where it was just referred to as the tree fund. There were some suggestions made in terms of the operations and reporting related to the tree replacement fund. That is not something that is integral to the ordinance. It is really a policy consideration and maybe something that you want the Planning and Community Development Department to produce information on an annual basis. One clarification that we thought was important, Section 2.14, the alternative compliance. As we've discussed that article over the last month and a half, we believe that the way it is written in the proposed ordinance has a bit of ambiguity in it that should and can be easily rectified. So we're proposing that section be revised to what is shown on the lower half of the slide. Basically, what we're clarifying is that the significant tree replacement unit credit for trees that would be planted within the buffer, if required as a condition of zoning. Because it would be required as a condition of zoning, that's an as of right standard there. And the original language didn't really say that. The original language said both that and the request to plant off-site were both at the determination of the board. What we believe this updated language does is clarify that if it is a condition of zoning, it can be counted as of right. And then to plant off-site is at the discretion of the county commission. So we believe that this corrected language removes some ambiguity and some potential problems in application. One other piece we want to mention, as we have reported at the previous meetings, there are some UDC companion changes that eventually should go along with the ordinance. I think there was a discussion following the last meeting of whether those needed to be enacted at the same time. It is our opinion that the tree ordinance as presented, or as you may choose to modify it, does make a significant step in enhancing and strengthening the county standards. The UDC changes would further do that, but we believe that the tree ordinance as presented makes a significant step and should be considered at this time. It won't hurt you to consider these later. These will just strengthen the direction based on what we heard from the public through the process. So I will pause with that and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Now, since I've already opened the public hearing, if the first person who would like to come speak in favor would like to come forward, we will start the timer.
Good evening. My name is Claudia Gamlin-Castro. I'm the Deputy Director of Smart Growth Forsyth County, and I just want to, because these new changes, they've kind of thrown my little presentation off. Sorry. Real quick, on November 21st, there will be a third public hearing.
Correct.
Good. So then I have only one point to make, aside from thanking you for letting us speak this evening to something that is measurable and immeasurable at the same time, and that is that we need to plan for trees first. And this has to be a mindset. This has to be something that is innate within our thinking and our being. We have to plan for the trees first. In section 2.4, which is found on page 12 of the draft, the permit review procedures, paragraph A refers to a pre-submittal conference, and Smart Growth believes that in order to correctly and adequately plan for trees on a given site, the language here should read, developers and design professionals shall meet with the county arborist and other Department of Planning Community Development professional staff prior to submitting the plan. This is instead of what is currently written, which says developers and design professionals are encouraged. Okay? Encouraged doesn't bring anybody to the table. Encouraged doesn't plan for the trees. Encourage doesn't make sure and ensure that 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, we have planned correctly for how Forsyth County will look and feel. This is really a small part in what it is that we can do to assist this ordinance to be strong and to be adhered to. We don't intend it to be punitive, and we don't believe it's punitive. It's not meant to delay a project, but rather it's so that everyone is ahead of the curve and planning correctly. This works in both the developer's favor as well as the county's favor and interests from a workflow standpoint, and also we believe that this is a win-win-win situation. Developer wins because they know what's expected, county wins because your ordinance is being followed, and last but not least, the trees win, which is why we're all here this evening. So we're trying to get, if we want to get anywhere with planning for trees first and planting trees first, as over 250 citizens have asked, then this is where we need to put our best foot forward. The developers and the design professionals shall meet with the county arborist. That's the only change that we're asking to section 2.4. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Claudia.
So my name is Federica Goldoni. I'm a resident of Forsyth County, and I'm asking you tonight to add a line in the ordinance stating that a tree value matrix will be adopted and used to qualitatively assess tree size, health, and canopy that the tree provides or will provide when mature, and to use to identify extremely high-value trees, moderate and poor value trees. I'm also requesting that this line states that extremely valued trees and high value trees shall not be taken down, and moderate value trees shall be saved as much as possible as per the arborist's evaluation. A tree value matrix is a useful tool that has been recently developed and successfully field tested in other jurisdictions, and it helps to qualitatively assess and identify value trees. Today, the temperature outside is 98 degrees. We are in October. We are breaking all records in terms of heat. The drought is severe, and taking down trees is making it worse. So I am asking you tonight, we have the opportunity to improve the tree ordinance in a significant way and to really make a difference. And I'm asking you to commit to save existing trees in a significant way so that we can see a difference between how it's been done so far and new and future developments. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is D. Rudechi. I reside in Forsyth County. I'm a treasurer for Smart Growth Forsyth County. I would like to take a moment to talk about the fourth pillar of the Smart Growth recommended revision to the County Tree Ordinance, the idea that the ordinance must come with effective enforcement. As my colleague Patrick Foster spoke to earlier, we must adequately resource the county arborist to take on his new greatly expanded duties. This has to include additional enforcement personnel. But there is a question as to how we can resource these new and additional requirements. Part of the answer is in the fees to be assessed. These fees are now set at $750 an incident, but they're also capped for commercial development. Why? Why would we want to cap these penalties for potentially the very worst offenders? It does not pass the common sense test. There is a talk that this will dissuade commercial development that we badly need in the county. Really? We are in the top 20 wealthiest counties in the entire nation. Do we really believe that being ecologically responsible will dissuade quality commercial development from residing in our county? Removing the cap creates a very real potential to offset some of the cost of enforcement. But what about our existing resources? Smart Growth has argued from the beginning that the existing Tree Protection Commission should be leveraged to assist the county arborist. Moreover, the UDC should be revised to not only invite quality subject matter experts in the commission, but should also include representation from each district, much in the same manner as in the planning commission. In fact, SGFC believes that the Tree Commission should serve as a very similar purpose in providing plan review resources to the county arborist, much in the same way as the planning commission supports the BOC. And what is more, they should be similarly compensated. Yes, we believe our trees are that important. The role of a government is to provide a safe, stable, healthy environment for its citizens. Trees are the vital component to that quality of life. Make that hard choice. Resource and codify effective enforcement. Protect our trees, protect your citizens. Thank you.
My name is Robert Slaughter. I'm a resident of District 5. I've been a resident in Forsyth County for nearly 20 years. I'm the managing director and founder of Smart Growth, which has been working growth issues since 2005. Board of Commissioners, like you, Smart Growth Forsyth County has worked on this issue for more than a year. You have heard tonight 3 of our recommended 4 pillars that baseline our recommendations to the county. Number 1, plan for trees first. Number 2, save the best trees. And number 3, ensure effective enforcement. We've not spoken to the 4th pillar yet, that of stopping mass grading, as we plan to speak to that during the public hearing, but I will include some of that in my closing remarks. We came to these pillars much in the same manner that you revised the ordinances. We sought and we hired subject matter experts. We sought public opinion. In fact, we recently circulated a short social media petition regarding these pillars, which almost immediately garnered over 250 signatures of support, 6 pages worth in only a couple of weeks. And I'll provide this for you. We think that these pillars are reasonable, they're effective, and they're ultimately doable. And to be fair, we think to a large extent you have reached out and incorporated them into the code. Of course, not to the degree that we might like, but nonetheless, we are grateful for what has been done thus far. But we want to close our remarks tonight with 2 clarion notes of caution for you. The first is that you must embrace and accept the cost of what you're proposing. If you pass these changes without resourcing the county arborist, then this is simply a whitewash. No one individual could possibly hope to do all that's required by the changes. I think you'll find plenty of public support for this, particularly if you take another creative look at leveraging what you already have, specifically the Tree Commission. While it may have been a defunct organization in the past, it has a great potential to aid the county as it endeavors to move forward into this century. The second warning for you is that if you fail to significantly change your mass grading language in the soil and sedimentation ordinance beyond that which has already been proposed, you will again create a situation where development and enforcement are at odds with each other within the ordinance. For mass grading not only is a visual blemish and a stormwater nightmare, it destroys the fundamental underpinnings of a healthy tree ecosystem. You can save all the trees that you want, but if you destroy the soil and the soil composition that's around them, these trees will not last, and you will have achieved nothing. The current proposed language does nothing substantive to support this, or to address this. Smart Growth thanks you for the work you have done so far, but in closing, we must recommend these two final issues be addressed before you vote any changes into effect. As you have already voted this evening to take additional time, we hope that you will consider these 2 points. Smart Growth remains committed to our county and stands ready to assist you in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, if there is anyone who is here to speak in opposition to this changes to our ordinance or has any comments of any kind, come forward at this time.
Good evening. My name's Stephen Davis. I'm with the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association. Thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight. Chairwoman Samanson, I think tonight we can actually agree on something. It's that on Saturday we'll both be pulling against Auburn. So I'm glad for that. But no, thank you guys for giving us additional time to discuss this very important matter. As currently written, we think it could have tremendous impacts on the builders that you guys want, which are those small and custom builders. The way it's written right now, it could add tremendous costs that these builders cannot carry to build those homes. So we're glad we'll have that time to do that. We hope during this this interlude that we'll be able to have some public workshops, kind of the same way that happened with the residential design standards, to allow input from the Tree Commission, from our coalition of folks, and Smart Growth Forsyth as well. So thank you for that. Look forward to working with y'all.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, distinguished commissioners. My name is Kimberly Steele. I'm a policy analyst with the Council for Quality Growth. And I also want to commend you guys this evening for allowing us additional time, adding another public work session so we can provide, our members can provide input on the implications of the proposed changes of the tree protection ordinance and the soil erosion ordinances. You know, like Stephen mentioned, there's a lot of financial burdens that will be placed on your local home builders, and we just want to have the opportunity, look forward to inform you on the implication of those changes. So we look forward to working with you guys, and please consider the Council for Quality Growth as a policy resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak to this issue? Okay. Well, we've already announced that we're going to have another public hearing on this, so is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we are now closed with a vote of 5-0. Board members, I think we've discussed at our previous meeting and have individually amongst ourselves have had some concerns, particularly with the impacts on an individual homeowner, and are anticipating that there'll be some significant changes there. So of course we're going to have another public hearing on that. Do you all wish to deliberate on this more this evening, or do we want to wait until our next public hearing?
I'm fine.
The latter?
Waiting.
All right, in that case we will move on to our second public hearing. Tom?
It's a public hearing for proposed modifications of the Forsyth County Soil Erosion and Sedimentation Control Ordinance, Ordinance number 73. Eric Bosman from Kimberly Horn will give you a presentation on this topic.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So, as we discussed in September, it is a singular edit for Ordinance 73. The language is there for your review. What we want to talk about just very quickly is the genesis of this information and how this specific piece was arrived at. This was a series of work sessions with the Planning and Community Development Department, the Department of Engineering, and our team to try to find a reasonable way to cut down on large-scale mass grading as part of major single-family subdivisions. The reason it was major single-family subdivisions is that is very clearly what came out of the comprehensive plan process, was some dismay by the citizens associated with very large subdivisions within the county that take quite some time to be developed. And the single-family subdivisions have a number of smaller parcels which can be land planned and arranged versus commercial and industrial developments, which tend to have very large buildings and don't have that same flexibility. So that's really the genesis behind this ordinance, is to cut down on the large-scale mass grading, particularly relevant to single-family subdivisions. And the 20 to 25 acre standard that was established for your consideration was based on a study of subdivisions in Forsyth County. You'll remember during the comprehensive plan process, one of the questions that was asked of the community is, what are the development areas of the county that you think are really well done, and where are there some areas in the county that could have been done better? So we went back to look at those subdivisions that were specifically pointed out in the comp plan as those that are cherished and well done within the county, and most of those tend to have sections of the subdivisions that are built in 20 to 25 acre units or pods. Now, part of that is because there are streams running through those areas, and the streams do this naturally. What this does essentially for those areas that don't have streams is mimic the same development pattern than you see at those areas, which we were told during the comprehensive plan process were those that were appreciated and valued by the community. So that simply takes this and puts it within the context, provides a little bit of the background for why we arrived at this particular recommendation in coordination with the Department of Engineering.
And can I ask Eric a question now? Do I need to wait?
Just a clarification?
Well, yeah.
If you think it's going to be follow-on, we'll wait till afterwards. And if it's just
We can
a
wait.
Okay.
I can wait.
You think it might be something would affect the questions being asked?
I can wait.
In that case, is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And our public hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. If you're to speak in favor of this ordinance change, please come forward at this time. Okay, I'm seeing none. If there's anyone who is here to speak in opposition to these changes, please come forward.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. It's good to see you again, 2 minutes later. My name is Robert Slaughter. I live in 1970 Daves Creek Road, District 5, and I've been a resident of Forsyth County for almost 20 years, and I'm the managing director and founder of Smart Growth, who's been working in the county for the last 15 years on related issues. I'm speaking tonight against this change, both as the managing director of Smart Growth Forsyth County and as a private citizen. The proposed change does nothing to really change the mass grading practices in the county beyond introducing a delay in that process by forcing developers to checkerboard their development. And I will propose to you that to equate developments that are valued by the public with that of mass grading is a false equivalency. Those are two independent issues. There was no discussion whether or not these valued developments were the result of mass grading or not. We just simply like them, whether it's Vickery or something else. There's no penetrating analysis as to how those developments were built, just that we like them. So I don't think that that's a fair comparison. That said, the current language allows for the grading of 20 out of any given 25 acre parcel, and then a second 20 acres out of an adjoining 25 acre parcel, so long as there is a 5 acre buffer included. The developer must then wait until one of the two have been stabilized. And if you can read stabilized as compacted soil with some straw over top, right? So, how long does that take? Is it a week? Is it a month? If you have a 100-acre proposed development, you're simply checkerboarding the grading of that development. In fact, the developer can come in and at the bottom of the language, they can come in and ask for a topographic hardship clause, meaning, the terrain is such that I need to grade all 25 acres, not just 20 out of 25. I don't see, I've tried to figure out how does that work? How does that change the ability of a developer, whether he's developing a 20-acre parcel, a 100-acre parcel, to mass grade that parcel? It doesn't change. It doesn't require the developer to grade to the land. It's also hard for us to imagine what 20 acres looks like. And so I brought something with me tonight. Like how many homes go on 20 acres? What does that look like? So if you put up this first one, I have two ZAs to look at. These are older, they've been built out. The first is 3635 and the second is 3725. Interestingly, they are both slightly less than 20 acres. The first 3635 had 54 homes projected on it. 3725 had 33 homes projected on it. And this is what the area looked like in 2009, 10 years ago. Next slide. Here's what it looks like today. Go back a slide. That's 2008. Go back a slide, please. Or can I do that? Maybe I can do that. There we go. That's 10 years ago. That's today. Those are 20-acre parcels. That's what your ordinance right now will allow. You string all those together, that's what it looks like. Smart Growth feels that you owe it to your citizens to show us graphically. Don't use our example. Use your own example with your own GIS department. Show us graphically and put it on their website what the impact of the new language really looks like. Because I really couldn't get my mind around it until I started doing something like this. We don't believe that the ordinance as it's written today is going to stop mass grading. We can show you on a different slide what it did to the actual topography of the site. You can look at it in 2008, you can look at the contour intervals, and you can look at it today. If you want to put that other brief up, you can. Your GIS department can show you similarly. We went from a hilly terrain with ravines and water to something that was flat and filled in its elevations. And what's more, that's the very thing we're worried about, right? The developer comes in and says, next slide. Oh, go ahead, next slide. Look at this terrain. This is horrible terrain. I need an exception. Go to the next slide. Keep going. Here comes a new topo. Look at all the flat area. Go back. There's the streams. Go back up and you'll see it come in. You can see where there's ravines, there's cuts, there's water. And the final slide is it's all flat. You can go to the last slide if you can get there. Oh, I keep forgetting I can do it. Sorry. See how it flattens out? That's what your ordinance does right now. So, we heard you tonight. You're kicking this down the road to November. I think that's a great idea. I think we would ask you to take that additional time to really go back and think about what you're agreeing to. We urge the BOC to go back to the drawing board, no pun intended, and put an end to this kind of development. Force development to build to the land, not create land for their own profit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition to this ordinance change? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion, the public hearing is now closed with a vote of 5-0, similar to the previous item. I guess we're going to go ahead and move on and deliberate on this when we bring it back in November. Unless, you did have a comment. I'm so sorry.
I do. I'm going to put Renee on the spot too. I'm sorry, Renee. I want to get you to come up here too. I've just got a question for you, and I wanted to ask Eric something too. I know, she's looking at me like, don't do it to me. But, so first with Eric, how much do our zoning categories, our residential categories, impact on the mass grading? Like, if we, I know right now, we're working on our conservation category, but right now all we have is a Res 1 conservation. So if we had a CR2, but we don't have it anymore. I mean, so if we have, you know, I mean, if we only have certain categories, you know, that we have, I mean, does that influence what the developer does?
So what came up during the comprehensive plan process, you sort of mentioned the conservation subdivision. I mean, to a degree, yes. Based on the zoning classifications that are available today, they have stipulations related to the size of the home and the size of the lot. And so that does create some limitations. And I think one of the recommendations that came out of the comprehensive plan was to relook at the conservation subdivision ordinance and retool it in a way that would make it more effective. I think what we heard both from the community and the residential community and the development community is it's not effective in its current state, and that's why you're not seeing a lot of it. So what we've tried to do with this ordinance is take what you're getting today and scale it down to a sense. I mean, that's what the ability here is. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as part of that UDC edit slide, part of the stipulation here would be a UDC edit, or part of the benefit here would be adding the UDC edit, which provides an area of separation, which would look very different from some of the examples that you saw this evening. But yes, I mean, you're taking the lot sizes and the yields that are available in your ordinance today and applying them to various pieces of property that are owned by a number of citizens throughout the county and have expectations for what those parcels might be. And so what we've done throughout this process, and I think we've used the slide every night except for tonight, is to try to create a balance between what is sustainable, reasonable growth and what our private property rights are in trying to find a middle ground between those.
But, so if you're trying to say that you've got, if one category, if it's a Res 2 that we're promoting and pushing, that we zone to most of the time, and if those are 22,000 or whatever they are, if we create the sprawl per se and a certain lot size, you're going to have more pavement, you're going to have bigger lots, and you're going to have more grading.
I mean, I think the expectation plus the lot size plus the lack of flexibility within the ordinance does create some constraints.
But if we offered more incentives to maybe perhaps have more green space left intact, then you could have less grading, is my point.
It's possible.
And that doesn't equate to you have to have more density. All right, Renee. So help us understand, and maybe the audience, I always have been told about mass grading in relation to making water go a certain way, or to the stormwater, or to the, I don't know the correct name for it, but the metro, whatever it is, guide.
Well, our stormwater ordinance is dictated by the model ordinance from the Metropolitan North
Tell
Georgia
people
Water.
who you are.
I'm Renee Hogue, county engineer. Our stormwater ordinance mirrors the model ordinance by the Water Planning District. And certainly we have requirements for controlling the quantity of runoff, the small storms that are detrimental to channels sometimes, in addition to treating for water quality. The grading that is oftentimes necessary to collect that water and take it to the various stormwater BMPs that are required is often outside the right-of-way. So you can build the road and put in the utilities, but depending upon the topography, can you control the water? So of course the smaller the lot, the more lots you have and less room you have to do any work on the individual lot. So that's, I think, what we think of as the totally mass graded. Now, a larger lot gives you a little more room. You're still going to ultimately grade the lot, but is it going to be graded initially with the developer, or is the builder going to do it? We've found that we have a little more control when the developer does it, because we're seeing it at the same time. So I think the idea behind what Eric was assisting us with on the revision is to reduce the amount of area that's disturbed at one time and kind of concentrate it in areas similar to what you would have in a conservation subdivision. You know, ideally what I've always been taught a conservation subdivision would be is a clustered area of really of smaller lots, but then the trade-off is 40% or more of the site left undisturbed, so you have large contiguous areas with trees and no disturbance at all. But it's a hard question, not to take down too many trees, not to grade too much, but to also think about what's going to happen after it's built and the people that are going to live there from a stormwater perspective. And it's a tough question. So.
But there is more to consider. It's my point, in the mass grading, there's more to the environment than looking through something through a glass darkly and just looking at just the trees or just the grading. There's an engineering aspect of it that you get involved in, we have to consider as well.
Right. Well, it's got a lot of layers to it. It's not just one piece of it, and it's not just the stormwater. It's not just the trees, and it's what you're physically able to construct. You have limits to how steep the slopes can be, and how much room you need to build, how much fill you have to place. So I don't think you can just look at one piece of it isolated.
Renee, you mentioned a couple times by regulations we have to follow. Are you meaning county regulations or state regulations that the county has to follow?
State regulations the county has to follow. All of our, well, at least the Ordinance 73 and Ordinance 75 is our stormwater. Those are based on model ordinances that the state requires us to adopt.
Right, so our ordinances now mirror the state ordinances, which will astronomically affect what we can and can't do with this grading ordinance. Is that correct? Because of the stormwater regulations.
Yes, that's a component of it.
Okay.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I just don't think a lot of citizens consider that we have to consider these state ordinances as well. It's not just there's just a lot of layers to this.
That's true.
I guess one thing to keep in mind, though, is a state level ordinance, it would be a baseline, because each community may have some different concerns that other areas do not. You know, as we were talking about earlier, with differences between the coast, mountains, all the different areas, there may be things that are unique to the topography in one particular jurisdiction that are not necessarily statewide concerns, and so that's where you might have a layer of your own local ordinances that would sit atop the baseline of the state level ordinance.
Absolutely. The state ordinance is the minimum that you are required to adopt.
Right.
And Ken can speak to what you can or cannot be more restrictive, and there are particular items that you can't be more restrictive, but certainly every community has things that are unique to that community. I think the concern in terms of the grading is the ordinance has to have just a little bit of flexibility, so that depending upon what the site looks like, are you able to grade what you need to grade?
Are you saying you grade what you need to be able to grade in order to comply with the state minimums?
Yes.
Okay.
Or to comply with another ordinance.
Gotcha.
So you can have a mass grading ordinance, but if it's so restrictive that you can't go beyond a certain area, then how are you able to control the stormwater?
They might have to plan for that property differently.
Right.
They might not just be able to build that plan.
It needs to be addressed up front.
Right.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is there any further discussion on this, or are we going to go ahead and move to number 3? We will plow on then. Public hearing number 3, Mr. Brown. And then Mr. Brown.
AZ 190022, located in Commission District Number 2. This is a public hearing for Linda Bodnar regarding the amendment of condition number 12 placed on zoning application 3198. The applicant's also requesting a variance to reduce the rear setback an additional 4 feet to allow the rear setback to be 6 feet.
Hello, I'm John Whittingslow from Miller Landscape. I'm working with the Bodners at 2630 Hillendale Circle.
Are you here to present or speak on or speak in favor of?
Present.
Okay.
Or speak in favor of the.
I mean, no, let me go ahead and open the public hearing.
Sorry.
Yep. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion, second, please vote. And we're with a vote of 5-0. Come on forward. If you're speaking on behalf of the applicant, that's a little not just presenting to us, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, we, like you said, we're just looking to reduce the building setback from 10 to 6 feet so they can fit a expansion of their existing deck, and so we can fit a spiral staircase so they can get from their main level floor of their house to the lower patio on the outside. It's currently screened by planting, and during the public participation letter, we didn't get any negative feedback. The neighbors to the right and left of them met with homeowners and said they were in favor of the idea, and there wasn't any negative comments. So it was pretty straightforward.
I'll see if anybody else is here. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
The motion is second, please vote. And we're closed. Okay, you might want to come back up. Commissioner Brown, I believe this is your district. If you'd like, you may have some questions.
It's an HOA, right? Is it an HOA?
It's a private residence. It is in a homeowner association neighborhood, though.
Okay, so there is not one?
No.
Okay. And everybody was for it?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm ready for a motion.
Go right ahead. Now, were there 2 different site plans in our book? If you want to reference one in particular over the other?
There should just be the one with the existing setback shown in red and the proposed in blue.
Okay. My notes just said that there were 2 different ones. Does that look like the site plan you had in mind? With the red lines on there? Okay.
That's the latest one.
Okay.
Commissioner Brown, it's all yours. I just want to make sure there wasn't more than one to consider.
No, thank you for that. Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the amendment of zoning conditions ZA 3198 High Point Capital LLC by Linda Bodnar, and a variance to the UDC Table 11.2B AZ 190022 for parcel 110-308, conforming with the design presented on the screen as briefed by the representative of the applicant.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Public hearing number 4. Oh, it's about time for the Todd hour.
AZ 190021, Commission District Number 3.
Oh, it's a Todd show. You just have to turn it on.
This is a public hearing for Hal and Miriam Shamira regarding the addition of condition number 12 placed on zoning application 2497. The applicant's also requesting a variance to reduce the side yard setback 6 feet to allow the side yard setback to be 4 feet.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to give a presentation or just to speak in favor?
I'm the applicant. What is that?
Okay, well, I'll open the public hearing then. Just give me 1 second. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, please vote. And we're open. Please come forward, state your name, and plead your case.
Good evening, Board. My name is Hal Schmerer. I'm a resident of Cumming, Forsyth County. What this request is we are building a garage in our yard. That is the only place we can put it because there are drainage and floodplain restrictions in other areas of our yard. And if we don't get this a request approved to do a 4-foot setback instead of 10 foot, then that garage will be right up against the air conditioning compressors, the house itself, and will now allow us to maintain the house, paint it, and if anything happens to those air conditioning compressors, to have that worked on. Don't know why the builder put our house so close to the line, but they did, and that is why we're requesting that. I did get a letter from my neighbor on that side who does support this request, and that was in the documentation I think you have. What else would you like to hear?
Just be glad you don't.
After we close the public hearing, Commissioner Levent may have some questions for you.
Okay.
I'm going to see if anyone else is here to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition? This is where you really look back. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And we're closed. Commissioner Levent, this is your district. Did you have some questions for your applicant?
I do. Sometimes the builders put them too close to the line because your building lot's too small.
Perhaps.
Yes, sir. But this happens quite often for pools, garages, expansions of decks. We see this all the time, as you saw. The item before you was for our deck expansion. So tell me about your neighbors. How do they feel about it?
Oh, they support it. It does. They already have a fence on that side between the houses that's a good 6 to 8 feet high. They realize that putting the garage there will not increase their noise. As a matter of fact, it will actually probably reduce it because it's all. I have it completely insulated, including an insulated garage door. Because I was mindful of the fact that I cannot add anything to the noise level at all in the neighborhood. And I might add also that this was approved by the HOA for Ashbrook subdivision.
Commissioners, anybody else have any other questions? He has his letters, I believe, in order.
I was going to ask him if he had talked to his trees. How did they feel? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Why don't you ask Ms. Commissioner Mills, taking a look at the gentleman's shirt, are you wondering if there's going to be any motorcycles in that garage? All righty, I think we're okay with this. I make a motion that we approve. Let me turn to my page. The variance request on the AZ 2497 on AZ 190021 as requested and shown on our screen for the table 11.2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Congratulations, because they don't always go through. It just seems like it tonight.
You heard he liked motorcycles. That's why you wore that shirt, didn't you?
Oh, somebody must have told you.
My wife told me to.
Public hearing number 5 was postponed until November the 7th, which brings us to public hearing number 6. I'm going to let you announce it, and then I'm going to punt, because I did not get this adoption.
What are you going to do? Are we going to follow
Oh, well, I'm so
Yeah, we've
sorry. I
gotta
thought it was a
go.
Todd show. I did not mean to interfere.
Yes, that's
I've
right.
got them all
Yes.
scribbled down here at the bottom. First was old business.
You can't turn the
number
TV off
1.
yet.
I know. Old business number 1.
Zoning application 3949, Seth Chandley, located in Commission District Number 3. The request is to rezone 4.354 acres from A1 to HB to build a 10,000 square foot vehicle rental establishment, a 8,700 square foot contractor's establishment, and a 12,000 square foot office/retail building. The property is located on Francis Road. The Planning Commission recommends approval of this rezoning from A1 to HB with conditions. We do have a red line version of the conditions we will be displaying here momentarily. The public hearing was held on August 27th. The proposed use was found to be in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Staff supported the application.
I'll let those scroll, and then I'll go back through and explain all the changes. All the changes that you'll see, though, are add additional items to it, which would be additional brick or stone, additional buffers, additional plantings, more specifically to where any kind of outside storage has to be, and the screening of that. And it also makes it more specific on their plan for landscaping, and not just the one on file with the county, but the one that's been updated to accommodate all these additional conditions. So I guess you want to, sir, you want to come up? And they seem to be fine with everything, so everybody's in agreement. Have you read all the conditions and you talked to Mr. Cole about everything?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and you're okay with everything?
Yes, we are.
Good, excellent, excellent. Okay. That works for you, it works for me. I make a motion to approve the ZA 3949 to rezone Agricultural District A1 to Highway Business District on 4.354 acres with the conditions displayed in red line, and may I also see the site plan, please? This needs to be the new one. And the site plan displayed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
And thank you for your patience. It's a much cleaner zoning now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, now we are on to our administrative hearing number 1.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'm ready to introduce this item.
Okay.
Administrative hearing. This is an administrative hearing in reference to violation of the alcohol ordinance for Carnosar, Inc., doing business as Sitco at Cummings Square, located at 1410 Atlanta Highway. Named licensee is Gayatri Rathori, with my apologies for any mispronunciation. In this case, an employee was issued a citation for no employee alcohol permit and underage alcohol sale. A prior citation for no employee alcohol permit was issued on March 20th, 2019. This is 3 violations within 24 months for this establishment, and as I think was said earlier, this falls within Commission District 3.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the administrative hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And the administrative hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. With the representatives of the party being heard, come forward. Sure.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Ethan Underwood. I'm representing the cited party here. We have Mr. Tappan. Remind me how, state for the record your name, please.
Tappan Rator.
We are here asking for, honestly, we're here with our hat in our hand and asking for the commission to work with us on this. There has been, as we noted, 3 citations in 24 months. The first came in March, and it was a unfortunate event. Mr. Rator had a employee who represented to him that they had a license to sell alcohol. They had been hired, and this person did not. Candidly, that should have been confirmed, but when you hire your representatives, then he has managers who are managing the store for him, and they just did not check that as they should have. At that time in March, the sale occurred. Fortunately, it was not to anyone underage, but there was a sale by someone who had no license. In July, and if I can, I'll put up our presentation. This is a photo of the store, and what's important is if you notice at the front, it's also a U.S. Postal Service location where you can wire funds and send materials. There is a separate clerk who handles that, and that clerk had been instructed not to sell anything at the other register or sell alcohol. The clerk did. The clerk has been discharged. They were fired for that, but they sold not only without a license, they sold to a minor without a license. So we understand Mr. Ratori here understands the seriousness of this. He has been, we wanted to emphasize, and if I may present to the commission, he has implemented self-checks.
You can give it to the clerk. Do you have copies for everyone? They can distribute it.
The first document that you see, the slide, is actually a check that was from the Department of Revenue. And the Department of Revenue sends in folks to make sure that sellers or folks who possess state alcohol license are in compliance. And this was dated actually September 3rd, 2019. It says that special agents of the Department of Revenue recently conducted compliance investigations. The undercover operator visited your business establishment attempting to purchase tobacco products. However, your employee requested proper identification from the underage individual and otherwise refused to sell the alcohol products. In addition, the materials that I have distributed, this is the Training Institute for Responsible Vendors. They have been providing services. They provide what's called I guess it's a secret shopper.
Mystery shopper.
A mystery shopper that comes in monthly. And we've provided compliance checks that show, copies of compliance checks that show that they have passed those. Unfortunately, there were 2 incidents that occurred very close together. Mr. Rator has taken measures to, as we said, to terminate the employment of that employee. And we're here just asking for the commission's indulgence to allow them to keep his business in order, to get right and do whatever the board feels is necessary to pay the penalty for this. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I'd like to point out that we have been in Forsyth County in this business since 2004. Last violation that happened was in 2012, after which we put measures in place that violations wouldn't happen again. So it's been kind of smooth sailing for 7 years. The March violation, like Ethan mentioned, was an administrative issue. My manager just didn't check to see when this lady came back from maternity leave that her license had expired, and so we failed that one. And what happened in September was very unfortunate. That this lady had been told not to do any sales, only to stay in the post office. But it was after 2 o'clock. Her shift had been over, and she still stepped in on the other side. And unfortunately, we paid the price for it and are fired at the same moment. Now, you might think that this is not a one-off. If it's happened once, it certainly has happened before, but that's not the case. We have the mystery shoppers that come every month, and we haven't had any issues. We have the Department of Revenue that comes every year or every few months, and we haven't had any issues there either. So, unfortunately, this new lady let us down. She has been terminated. And going forward, I sure hope that this will never happen again, because I do take the seriousness of alcohol violations. And I have tried everything in the past few years to put systems in place that this will not happen. And I'm requesting that you will look into this favorably and let us proceed with our sales as usual. Thank you.
Is there anything further from your side?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. At this point, Mr. Gerard, do you have anything to submit for the record?
Commissioner, I don't. Obviously, the board is aware when I put on a presentation, but given the way they've approached, Mr. Underwood and I had spoken about this earlier, I do not have anything to present.
Thank you. Are there any law enforcement officers that are here with us this evening that want to add any additional comments to this? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and
close it, and we'll talk to them.
I'm going to make a motion here to close the administrative hearing.
Second.
You have a motion and a second, please vote. And we're now closed. I'm going to hand this over to Commissioner Levent. This is your district.
Officer, would you come up if you were involved in any of this? If you come down, please, just want to verify if there's anything additional information that may give us any kind of different thought patterns. You heard the testimony of what they presented by the licensee and as well as their counsel. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, sir, there's not.
It sounds pretty accurate.
Yes, sir.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Just a comment that it's a fairly short run from March until July, and that if you have managers that are charged with this, you might want to take a more personal interest in making sure that they're executing your policies.
So I would suggest, and I've done this before on this administrative part where they don't keep up with when the licenses expire, and I would suggest that you make a file that's month by month by month for your 12 months and put the expirations in the month before so you have a 30-day window to announce to that employee that your license is getting ready to expire. That way they have 30 days to make sure they're in order. That may help it never happen again. There are administrative, at least 2 of them, thankfully for you, because if you had 2 DUIs two underage back to back, I'm not very palatable to those at all. On something like this, I consider anywhere from 2, 5, 7 days, possibly even 10 on the outside, just because you have, but you only have 1 underage, so I'm just not, I'm going to make a motion to suspend your license for 7 days, consecutive days, starting next Monday.
Second.
Hey, do you want to call out what that date is and just make sure that Tom's office is aware?
Yeah.
I don't see Amy here this evening. So that would be to start on, you said next Monday? That
Yeah,
would
the
be
7th,
the
October
7th.
7th, for 7 consecutive days.
Okay.
And Todd, just so he'll know, I mean, the next one, if he gets another one,
I mean, honestly, especially if it's within 2 years, it wouldn't be nice. And just to let you know, and we're holding the vote for a second,
Yes.
just to let you know, I believe if it's anything over suspension over 28 days, and I could be corrected, I believe at that point the state comes in and you have to clear everything off your shelves, and they are not happy people. I mean, seriously not happy people with you.
and
So-
there's also things, if you sell the vaping stuff, if you sell, I mean, that count against it as well.
Non-traditional tobacco products.
Yeah, the
Yes.
non-traditional,
If you sell any of that non-traditional tobacco or any of this stuff and you get caught, it will count the same. So just really, really govern yourself accordingly. And the third offense in the 2 years, it's 5-year, it could be a 5-year revocation at that address, so. All right, we have the motion
Yes,
second.
we have a motion and a second to suspend for 7 days, beginning next Monday. Please vote. That motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And now on to new business number 7. That's our post-road signalization.
This was the item that I believe was added on a time-sensitive basis by the county manager?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Aaron?
Yes, we were approached by GDOT, so this location meets signal warrants, so we were asked to provide basically a design for a temporary signal. We reached out to the consultant, got a scope and fee from them. Unfortunately, we'd already given TYLN a 10% change order, so any subsequent change orders have to come to the board for approval. So that's what this is. So it's a not to exceed amount of $14,850.
So moved with some questions.
Second. We have a
So, hold on, we
Oh, I'm
have
sorry.
questions. So,
Very good.
Garen, this design and this intersection, I don't have a clear recollection. Are there turn lanes opposite of one another?
There are turn
So they'll
lanes
have
already
actually
there.
signal turn arrows
Yes.
as well in this design?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I'm good, thank you, ma'am.
All righty, then we'll call the vote. Please vote. And that does carry with a vote of 5-0.
I think we moved some magical earth there.
Yep. All righty. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
I chose that.
We'll move on to public hearing number 5, And this, I'm actually intending to punt on again, but I'll let you go ahead and introduce the item. Tom?
I have, correct me if I'm wrong, I had we postponed
Oh, no, I'm
that.
sorry. Number 5 has been
November
punted.
7th.
It's number 6. We
Number
did
6.
We
I'm
did
ready to
postpone
that.
them. That's the one I'm planning to kick out.
AZ 190020, located in Commission District Number 5, a public hearing for Corkery Enterprises, Inc. regarding the amendment of conditions 5, 14, 18, 20, and 24, as well as the addition of condition number 31, placed on zoning application 3869. The applicant's also requesting a variance to reduce the minimum heated floor area per dwelling by 572 square feet to allow the minimum heated floor area to be 1,428 square feet for the existing structures.
Thank you. And it was I dropped this one here. I'd spoken to the applicant's attorney earlier today and intended to postpone this during agenda adoption. So I'm going to punt this out until the November 7th public hearing. Ken, in that we advertised it and we did introduce the item, should I open and close it just procedurally?
Since we did in
Yes,
fact
I will do that
advertise
then.
it, I would recommend that, Madam
Is there a
Chair.
motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion is second. We're now open. Is there anybody who is here wanting to speak to this item? For? Against? Is there a motion to close this
So
item?
moved.
The motion is second. Please vote. Thank you. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back for a public hearing on November the 7th. That's my motion. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
And that's fine, nothing procedurally, I would just want
I
to
don't
clarify.
want his old business. We're going to go ahead and bring.
You did, okay,
Correct.
that was on purpose, thank you. I
Yes,
understand.
yes, sir. And that carries with a vote of 4-0 with Commissioner Mills temporarily out of the room. Which brings us to public hearing number 7.
Good evening. This is the third public hearing for the sketch plat recommended changes. If, Melanie, we can just go ahead and scroll. You have heard 2 of the 3 changes before. One is reducing the acreage applicability from 5 acres to 2. And the second major change is to add, when there is a change from the original approval of open display, outside storage, or a non-residential building expansion, if any of these 3 items are increased 10% or more from the original approval, that would also require a sketch plat and a site plan to go before the Board of Commissioners. There was a request, though, to add an additional section, and that was pertaining to an exemption for any targeted business or an extraordinary project as defined by the county's economic development ordinance. That language was added, and based on council's recommendation to hold a third public hearing to include that additional language, we have done so. So the board is free this evening to make a decision regarding adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Levent? There we go. The public hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. Is there anyone who is here to speak in favor of these changes to our UDC? Is there anyone who is here to speak in opposition to these changes? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
The motion is second. Please vote. Public hearing is now closed. Is there any discussion among the board? Would anyone like to offer a motion? If,
The motion, we accept the changes as presented by staff.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Public hearing number 8.
Good evening, Commissioners. Melanie, just a quick change. If we could come back to that first page at the end. Thank you. Okay, so, oh, perfect. So this is a board-directed change to automobile service establishment, both major and minor. Through discussion at work sessions in both February and June, it was determined that an update to these uses is desired. So major will receive a new definition that will read, An establishment providing major repair or bodywork services, including but not limited to collision repair, other bodywork, painting services, tire recapping, any services that would otherwise be considered minor auto repair services but are not performed in fully enclosed service bays with operable doors, and towing services shall constitute a permissible accessory use to this type of establishment, provided no open storage or impound storage occurs on the property. Minor will receive a definition that reads indoor service, an indoor establishment with fully enclosed service bays with operable doors for performing indoor vehicle repair and maintenance, including but not limited to brakes, oil changes, lubrication, transmission, engine belts, hoses, inspections, and tire mounting and installation. Any establishment performing such services other than in fully enclosed service bays with operable doors shall be deemed a major automobile service establishment, and towing services, again, shall constitute a permissible accessory use to this type of establishment, provided no open storage yard or impound storage occurs on the property. Additionally, we have a housekeeping item, 2 small changes to the open storage yard definition, and that is in the last sentence, or to of, and to or. And it should be noted that at the August 27th public hearing, the Planning Commission recommended approval of these changes with a request that separate definitions and use permissions be considered for repair of watercraft and other recreational vehicles, including golf carts, all-terrain vehicles, and RVs.
Can you explain that a little deeper?
I'm sorry?
The recommendations by PC.
What about it?
Get into more depth. Are they just making but if you made the recommendations on here, so if we make a motion, what's on the screen, it automatically happens? Or are they just wanting us to come back and reconsider at a different date?
They wanted to consider separate definitions for those other vehicles.
But not on what we're looking at tonight?
It's not included as a part
Thank
of
you.
those definitions.
That's a good call.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is also a board-directed change arising from a February work session discussion regarding truck terminals and truck parking and truck storage. And to determine these changes, uses involving these activities were reviewed. So use permissions for contractors' establishments will be changing from permitted to conditional in HB and HC. In Chapter 14, from permitted to conditional in M1, M2, and mine. Transportation, communication, and utility facilities except truck terminals from permitted to conditional in M2. And in this case, this is to align with a bit of language in Chapter 16, and it's Section 16-4.31, which reads that these facilities are permitted only as conditional uses because of various off-site impacts that may result from including but not limited to generation of waste, danger of explosion, et cetera, but it does state that they will be permitted as conditional uses, and we do have one permitted, so we are changing that to conditional, so these things align. And then truck terminals will be changing from permitted to conditional in M1, M2, and mine. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Ken Gerard for the short-term rental portion.
Right, Madam Chair, board members, thank you very much. My
Are we putting this in one?
discussion with respect to this is going to be very
Why is
limited.
it bonded?
This pertains to the short-term rental modifications that we adopted back in the spring. You may recall that about a month later, we took some action to basically make clear that no enforcement would occur until January 1st of 2020. And we are now simply memorializing that into the actual text of the code itself. I think that's the right call there. And so that's what this modification would do.
Are you bundling it with this?
It is in this, yes.
What are we, the federal government?
It's batched.
This is like federal government stuff. I thought we like ours nice and separated and clean and.
No. See, we are entering a new paradigm here where we're going to do cleanup batching of Unified Development Code provisions altogether.
What if one person didn't agree with one but the other? Then you're not just batching.
Then you can
convoluted.
You could in fact take action separately on each distinct change.
Thank you. I just like it's a little cleaner, it doesn't confuse the public at all, who doesn't follow it all the time.
Okay. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
Motion is second, please vote. And we're now open. Is there anyone who is here to speak to any of these changes to our UDC in favor? In favor? You like what we're doing, Ethan? Somebody mark this date down. Just coming down this, okay. Okay. Is there anyone who's here to speak?
Ethan Underwood, come on down.
I was going to mark the calendar.
I don't want to take up any time, but
Oh, no.
really excited.
Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition to any of the changes we're considering?
Just the only comment I had, Madam Chair, again, Ethan Underwood with Miles Hands for Talent, was the contractors' establishments comments. I'm not quite sure what the board's intention was in making all contractors' establishments in an industrial zoning a conditional use. There are already conditional uses in CBD, that makes some sense. But a contractor's establishment is pretty broad. It can include landscaping businesses, which is where we've run into some issues. I know Commissioner Levent and I worked on one of those, and maybe that's the issue that the board's interested in addressing. However, a contractor's establishment also includes HVAC companies, plumbing companies, and so, I mean, that's who you really want in an M1 zoning, I would think. So if you've got an industrial business and you say, well, I've now got a tenant who's a plumbing company, you can say, well, I can rent it to you, but you're going to have to go through the conditional use permit process. That's more work for me. That's great, but I don't know if that's what the commission intended. What I suggested to the Planning Commission was if the problem child is landscaping establishments, maybe we ought to make landscaping establishments conditional uses, but leave the other contractors' establishments, like plumbing companies and HVACs, only in the M1 category as a permitted use. We'll work with the system however you do it, but it just may make some of those businesses y'all are working so hard to attract here just have to go through the zoning process. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
A motion is second, please vote. And we're closed. Discussion amongst the board.
Yeah, I have a lot of agreement with what he just said, and it goes beyond just a few contractors he named. I mean, M1's M1, it's light industrial, that's where they belong to begin with. Now, if you're concerned that someone will have outside storage, which they do, then make their outside storage be the conditional use. Other than that, they're a clean business. I mean, they're industrial. And if they're not doing a lot of outside storage, it's a very clean business, more like an office. So I don't understand how that got put in there. I don't remember any pre-discussion on that or how that even came about. Can you tell us how that came about, the contractor establishments?
It was
going to
the
conditional
allowance
use?
for overnight parking of commercial vehicles.
So those contractors establishments all have to go to conditional use, or can we shape that to where it's for the some kind of outside storage? I mean, because I see some of these guys, yeah, they got heavy equipment parked out there. They may have, I know there's one in one industrial park I have, you can see their stuff. They have cranes parked out there. I probably think that should be conditional use because it's not very attractive. But a painter that keeps everything inside or inside their vans, or a plumber does the same thing, I don't know. I hate to run them through the conditional use permit. Doesn't seem like that's a good idea.
Well, we definitely could work around that. I think we have a couple options. We could go back to just having it be a permitted use. That's the easiest solution. If you had concern about the storage and parking components, we could do like we do with a kennel and split the definition, where we have kennels with indoor activity are allowed in certain areas, kennels with outdoor activity are allowed in a shorter list of zoning districts. We could follow that same pattern, say if the contractor's establishment has outside storage of materials or overnight parking of maybe a certain class of commercial vehicles, they require the cup. Without
does that resonate with you all? Does that make a little more common sense? They're going to pull up with 5 or 10 little vans they work at them, and everything's clean within them or inside their warehouse. I hate to drag them through a conditional use permit, but if they're gonna be a contracting establishment, it's all of a sudden gonna be things just piled up real high outside, that might be a whole different world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to look toward is to make sure there's a way to carve out the limitations on what they could, the parts that's problematic, the outside storage and becoming a truck yard, that type of thing. Because that is, I agree, that's where those types of businesses
Or
belong.
cranes, you should
I mean,
look at one, oh my God, they got cranes that are 40 feet in the air
You
sitting there.
obviously could do a zoning condition, but if these people aren't coming through the zoning process at all, and these are facilities that have already gone through the process, and it's too late to stipulate that, then those escape it.
What would
But-
you guys, and Ken, is it okay for, and I don't know what the time restraints are here or anything, but if we reconsider that, is it one more public hearing or is it two, depending on how in-depth we get?
You know, I mean, if we're taking the code and giving more flexibility to property owners, I'm not going to be as concerned about another public hearing. It's when we begin to add new layers of regulation that I really feel like we ought to do that. So if you're going to lessen a little bit, take back, I'm not going to be that concerned about it. But are you sure you want to do this evening, though? Do you think you might want to?
That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, can we just go with 2 weeks? Or do we have to go back to another public hearing? Or can we just do this in 2 weeks and let Tom bring us some categories of definitions of certain weight or size vehicles that?
Well, I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I don't mean to. But if we're talking about not just taking maybe a C and making it a P, but we're talking about adding some substantive nuances of what that looks like, I might want to think about it. It might be a position where I'll know it when it's actually presented to you.
So, Mr. Brown, can you pull together based on that, and maybe, are y'all okay with next public hearing?
Do we want to act on the rest of the
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And that's perfectly
absolutely.
in order.
Absolutely, yes, yes, ma'am.
isolate that one particular?
Yes. I just hate to put a lot of, that could affect, gosh, 100 different companies in the county if they ever go move around, and
Right.
they're a pretty clean operation.
Well, I will entertain a motion if you have one formulated.
I will. If you scroll back to the top of this, where we started on this. Not that far up. I think we did part of that already. I don't want to get in the short-term rental at all. I want to just get into, right there. So the Chapter 3 definitions, Article 2, specific definitions, as they've been redlined and changed, I'd like to make a motion to approve, with the exception of the contractor's establishments, for Mr. Brown to come back with some different clarifications of what could be outside storage and what's not before it has to be a conditional use permit. And there'll be a separate motion for short-term rental. Yes, what I missed?
Okay, just it might be easier if the motion is just to accept the modifications to Chapter 3. That's easy, because what you're talking about Chapter 12 tables is the next thing.
Okay,
you're
that'd be
talking about.
fine. So moved then.
Chapter 3 is
We'll break it
the
down.
motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion carries with respect to Chapter 3 with a vote of 5-0.
And then Commissioner Levant, with respect to your next section, you've got sort of the tables. You've got Chapter 12 tables. You've got Chapter 14 tables. Do you want to just sort of parse through those?
Yeah,
and
let's scroll down there a little bit. I thought everything seemed to be okay with me. The contractor's establishments is the only one I would love to see them come back with something that doesn't just do such a big blanket netting on everything. Is there anything else within there we need to worry about, or let them bring it all back in a month? I don't know. Is anybody in a hurry for all this?
When do you want to see it back?
At next public hearing, which is going to be, looks like November 7th.
No, it would be October.
We do our public hearings
October
typically the
22nd.
first Thursday of the month.
Well, we could do it October 22nd too, if you think, but go ahead.
Ken, would you be okay? I don't know if there's enough, yeah, there would be enough time for advertising, wouldn't there? Third? It looks like.
It need to go ahead and be advertised now, but yes, that would be enough time.
Is October 24th okay, enough time for advertising?
That's not enough time.
It's
Not
not.
unless
not,
we really
okay.
expedited, would it?
That's what I
Okay,
thought.
that's fine.
Well, it goes
Get on
all the way
track.
24th and the 3rd. You need 15 days for advertising, is that correct?
Well,
And you've got 20 there,
well, hold on.
21.
So if we got the ad in, the typical way we'd get the ad in would be to run it on the Wednesday, which would be October 9th.
You got just enough time.
Be the 15th day would be the 24th.
Can we do it?
Yes, we could
Tom,
do it.
Mr. Brown, are you okay with that?
I hate to make, I hate to make acquiescences on his staff,
Make it on
though.
the
I think
7th
that's
then.
really
Well,
Mr.
I'm
Brown.
asking, I'll ask him next. Do you think you can get that done? You don't have anything else to do you?
You send us out the door with clear direction, because we need a product that the public can review on the 9th when that ad runs. So we need to walk out of here with a real clear understanding of what you
I
want.
concur with
Then
that.
make it the 7th
All right, November 7th. The motion will be November 7th
for public hearing.
for public hearing.
We have a motion and a second, please vote. And we will hear that one portion back on the 7th, which leaves us with the
Oh,
change.
Ken's got
I
something. he
just,
wants-
Madam Chair, just real quick, I just, for the record, so was what was postponed, and I thought this was what
Chapter 12
Commissioner
table.
Levent said, was the Chapter 12 and Chapter 14 tables.
Yes,
All
sir.
of it's coming back.
Yes, might as well do it all at once. Thank you.
Which leaves us with one remaining item, which is the Chapter 16 changes to Chapter 16.4.28D to clarify an action that we took earlier this year. Would anyone like to offer a motion? Then I make a motion that we approve the language as presented by council.
You want to read it one more time? just since
Sure
it's
will.
skipped around?
Pursuant to the Board of Commissioner action taken on May 21st, 2019, those modifications to the United Development Code approved April 18th, 2019 regarding short-term rentals shall not be subject to enforcement or citation until January 1st, 2020. This paragraph shall be retroactive to May 21st, 2019.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Thank you, board members.
And that motion also carries with a vote of 5-0. Okay. Moving right along, brings us to public hearing number 9.
This is also a board-directed change to add a definition for electronic game playing centers to the UDC. Currently, this use already exists in our use tables. The definition will be electronic game playing center, an establishment with the majority of its customer area dedicated to any combination of coin-operated amusement machines as defined by the state of Georgia. Currently, this is a conditional use in UV, CBD, and HB. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 5-0. We're now open. Is there anyone who is here to speak in favor of this change to our UDC? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing? We have a motion and a second. Please vote. We're now closed. I'm going to hand this over to Commissioner Mills because I know that the issue that the business model that brought this kind of to light was in your district, so.
Yeah, it was for the country folks, and it was just because all gaming centers, we just had one definition or one category for it, and we've allowed them to continue, and I think they've got everything worked out with the fire marshal, haven't they? If there's no questions, I'm going to make a motion to approve the UDC modifications regarding electronic game playing center definition as presented in our book.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 5-0.
Thank y'all for your help.
Public hearing number 10, Dave Gruen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the presentation for this item. This is the public hearing that we're required to hold on the proposed budget for 2020, after which the board will be able to adopt the budget at a future meeting, which we've currently scheduled and advertised for October the 24th, later this month. I do have a presentation, virtually everything here, except for maybe one reclassification I'll mention the board has seen before, so I'll go through this at a fairly steady pace, but please feel free to stop me if you have any questions to ask, or if you want me to slow down on something for the public. So I'll go through this for those in attendance and those viewing the meeting, if I may. Again, this budget, and now in addition to what used to be the O&M services, we now have virtually all the funds are here now as a total proposed budget. So in addition to the services listed here, just about any public service that the county provides across the county is now included in the proposed budget. And here's the budget process coming down to the last two dates on that calendar for a long budget year. These highlights we've seen before. I will mention that again, there's 45 total new positions in the current service level budget, 18 general fund and 27 other funds, and 31 new positions for the revised service level, 15 general fund, 16 other funds. I noticed I was going through and identifying them by department, so I have them before me. Most of the new positions are in those departments providing services directly to the public. So that relates to the increase, I think, demand for services and growth and so on. There's only a handful of positions that are really for internal administrative type departments. All right, I'll go through these summaries. We start with the classification of these services here, the culture and recreation, and what people will see there is the budget's included for the funding for the library, the parks and recreation budget, that's their operating budget at now just under $11 million. And then under housing and development is where we have the planning and community development budget at $7.5 million, as well as natural resources and conservation. Public health and welfare is where we include the animal shelter budget at just over $1.6 million, as well as animal services. It's related to those two combined. There's a significant number of new positions going into those two functions as they've seen a really tremendous increase in demand for services. We're trying to keep up with that. Also in that section is senior services at $2.4 million. And at the bottom of the page, public safety with the largest budget in the general fund for large area coverage, which is for the county, which is the sheriff's office services at just about $51.2 million, as well as emergency management agency and the ambulance service that the county funds at just under $1 million now with its regular 3% increase. Then we group together all of the judicial services, which just in total come to just over $16.6 million in the proposed budget for next year, just about a 7.2% increase over the revised budget in the current year. And then all the general government, which is most of those internal type departments I mentioned, administrative and support services are here. Also voter registration, which you'll see the increase for the presidential election year coming up next year. Their budget is at $1.4 million for that. And then finishing out the general fund is the contingency, the retiree benefits section, and then the non-departmental, which is primarily the transfers that go to other funds, such as to the capital replacement program and other transfers to the capital outlay fund and some matches for the grant fund and so on. So that brings us to, and I'll go to the next page just to briefly want to comment again as we did at the last presentation of this, the total proposed general fund budget at $149,692,067. And while on this page it's mathematically correct that there shows a 0% increase, that's compared to the revised budget. And I want to make it clear so we don't misrepresent this. That revised budget includes some large budget amendments, for example, the $10 million that was transferred to the capital fund from the general fund. I think a better comparison is if we compare that $149.7 million budget to the adopted budget to start the year we're in, at $137.9 million, it's an 8.5% increase, and I think that's a better portrayal of the real increase from budget to budget for the general fund. And then we show that as a balanced budget on the next page. We included in this book, as we did before in this presentation, a listing of the current service level, the new items that are included here in the general fund, and the revised service level, and this is what calls out all the various positions where you can see the different departments where those are located in. And then after that, we have listed all the other funds by the different fund types. And again, we list the changes for the current and revised service level in the other funds here by department and fund area. So you can see there where there's new positions and other new items. And then the summary of the special revenue funds themselves at just almost $9.2 million in total. The most significant ones here is the E911 fund at $5,563,000, which is completely supported by the fees that come from the phone bills, and that's why this is a separate fund. Those are the main things that are there in that grouping. Additional fund, we call out the two larger special revenue funds. First of all, the local insurance premium tax fund, otherwise referred to as the engineering fund, collected from the unincorporated part of the county, and it goes to those services in the unincorporated part of the county under engineering, such as roads and bridges, traffic engineering, and stormwater management, for a total budget of just over $14.4 million. And after that is the fire fund, supported by its own ad valorem property taxes at under just proposed almost $28.4 million there for the fire services countywide. And then we list under fire in the next page here, we list the new items for them and the new positions for the fire service, including 9 new positions going to fire protection, which will help, in addition to provide some captain positions. It will also mean that we'll be able to add more of the 4 people on a truck level of service we're trying to get the stations to over a number of years. Then the water and sewer fund, completely fee-driven, not subsidized with the general fund, at just under $77 million. You see the increase in charges for services, which represents a full year at the new rates that are approved, as well as the indexed rates or the built-in increase each year in the water and sewer rates. Recycling and solid waste fund, from the host fees coming in at $4 million. The host fees plus the collections at the recycling sites, I should add. And we've softened the revenues there a little bit, knowing that the host fees have been down with the difficulties that the current providers having at their landfill, so we've backed off of those revenues from that. The grant fund, which shows as proposed, and this often gets amended through the year, new grants that come in, but as proposed for grants we're aware of next year, it's the grant revenues are $5 million, transfers in from other funds at $1.2 million. It really represents the match toward that $5 million, so you get an idea there of the leverage that the county funds produce. And more than half of those grant funds there, or about half, is at $2.7 million for roads and bridges, which is primarily the LMIG funds we get in for resurfacing. The bond fund at $17.2 million. Main thing just to point out here, one thing is the interest payments, which while the principal payments go up and down depending on the schedules, we still have the interest cost and all of that outstanding general obligation debt, and you see because of some of the refundings, it's actually dropping by 6% for the actual interest payments next year, as budgeted, are going down over $400,000. And then we have the internal service funds on the last page of the groups of funds types we show. Included there is risk management and workers' comp, as well as our employee health benefits, and we call out the funding for the wellness center there, which will probably come in well under that number, but that's how much we had put aside for the wellness center, and also the fleet maintenance budget. And that's a quick walk through all of the summary of all the funds, and we won't spend too much time on it. The tax information has all been presented back in July when the taxes were levied. But just in closing, to show the rates that were sent out in the bills for this year was at the same, both the school district and the county, the same 27.654 in total mills. The county's portion, the same 7.936 mills, with a reallocation of the millage rates between a bond reduction and increase for the fire district and for M&O. And I'll stop here for any questions, or if the board's ready to open the public hearing, we're available for anything else that may come up.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Public hearing is now open with a vote of 5-0. If you're here to speak in favor of adoption of this budget, please come forward.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I am Kirk Wintersteen. This is what I believe. I do support this budget. I think it's going to be a good budget. But my concern is whether or not we're going to be able to keep doing this at the present millage rate. I think there's going to be pressure in the future to raise the millage rate on our homeowners. I think a part of this increase is going to come from high-density housing. But I think we can be proactive and we can manage our future tax revenues. We need a diversification of our tax base. We need employers to help pay the property taxes that our homeowners are now paying. Given the demographics that we have here, we need good quality employers bringing good paying, sustainable jobs for our citizens. We need employment centers along Georgia 400, and we also need the city of Cumming to step into the batter's box and create an employment center in Cumming. I think our citizens much more would prefer to drive into the city of Cumming and work and drive to adjacent areas to Georgia 400. You know, if you stop and think about our citizens, I believe our citizens are probably the highest functioning people in the state of Georgia. I do not believe they want to go out and drive on 400, and I don't believe they want to drive on double-decker 400. And I don't believe they want to ride to MARTA. To increase the quality of their lives and to diversify our tax base, we need to start moving. And I know this doesn't happen in a year or 18 months, but I want a constant force in this county pushing to get employment centers in our county so we can protect our millage rates on our homeowners. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor of the adoption of this budget? Is there anyone who's here to speak in opposition? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And as Mr. Gruen had mentioned, we're not going to be adopting this budget this evening, so unless anybody from the board has any specific comments, I'm going to assume we're ready to move on into our next phase of the meeting, and Karen will announce any public comments speakers that are with us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We're now at the second public comment portion of tonight's meeting. We do not have any forms, no public speakers that are signed up. If anyone would like to speak, please address the board at this time.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Ethan Underwood. What we first want to say is thank you for deferring the tree and the soil and sedimentation ordinance for a month. But we've got 30 days to try to work together and come up with something that works. In looking, I worked with the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association. We had a committee that reviewed the proposed changes, and some of them are good. Some of them we think we can do better than what's going on now. Some of them have some perhaps unintended consequences. That said, we're asking that the board would conduct workshops. It's very similar to what you did when we did the architectural standard. We could either do it at Fowler Park and invite the public. We could do it if the board is willing to give up your time to hold a special work session. But I think it makes sense to get the folks from Smart Growth, Forsyth, and the development community, and perhaps even the consultants, if the board's willing to have their time on there as well. Everybody in the room together to address, what they want and how we can get there. I think that we work well together, but sometimes we need the Board of Commissioners to facilitate that, and we'd certainly appreciate it if you would. So, thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to address the board, please come forward at this time. Madam Chair, I see none.
Thank you. Old business number 1 was already dealt with. Old business number 2 has been postponed out until November the 7th, which brings us to old business number 3. Mr. Brown.
CP 190012 North Shaw Properties LLC. This is located in Commission District Number 5. It's a request for the issuance of a conditional use permit to operate warehouses totaling 1,168 square feet, an open storage yard, and a residence for a night watchman in an existing 1,900 square foot structure on 1.461 acres of property currently zoned CBD. The applicant's also requesting 4 variances. The first, reduce the zoning buffer along the eastern, western, and southern property boundaries from 40 feet to 10. Number 2, reduce the zoning setback along the western boundary adjacent to the existing structure from 50 feet to 10. Number 3, reduce the side setback along the eastern property boundary adjacent to the existing residential structure from 10 feet to 0. And number 4, reduce the landscape strip along the eastern property boundary from 10 feet to 0. The property is located on Beaufort Dam Road. The Planning Commission recommends denial of the issuance of this conditional use permit. The public hearing was held on June 25th. The proposed use was found to be not in conformity with the comprehensive plan, and the staff was non-supportive.
Thank you. Is my applicant here? Okay, good, you are, because I needed to go over one of these things with you. If you could please come on down. In the past couple of weeks, I've worked with the applicant on trying to get them a little bit closer to reduce the number of variances that they're asking, essentially. And it is, unfortunately, it's one of those situations where we have an existing building that is out of compliance. We have another existing building that's out of compliance. They've been in place for decades. And so it's a use that has been there before. It's an owner that is new to that property but has been conducting that business elsewhere in the county. And so I did have some compassion for their situation, and it seems that the adjacent neighbors really were more concerned about the trees being, the facing neighborhood, more concerned that the trees in the front of the building might be removed. There's some ornamental trees that are along the front of that building, and the adjacent property owners did not have any issue with it. So this is one of those situations where I think going in and actually walking the property yielded a different viewpoint than simply looking at the documents did. But with that in mind, I know that we talked about some of the things that you could do to bring that property closer into compliance. And I do have, there should be a revised site plan. It's that I gave to Rhonda earlier today. If you could go ahead and throw that up. There is a storage container that essentially sat next to the building that it has been removed or is going to be removed.
Has been removed.
Has been removed. We've also looked at reducing the number of spaces that they're using, bringing it down from 70 to 60 spaces, which is going to provide a little bit more open space. There's an existing home that is on the property that's been used for a night watchman. It actually cannot even be relocated from where it is on the property. So with that in mind, there were several, there were 4 variances that they were originally asking for. I think we've eliminated the need for number 4, but I believe we may have also eliminated the need for number 3, which is the building, the setback along the eastern property to the existing structure. Because with that storage container now, are you hitting 10 feet?
Yes, the language
You are.
on the site plan is wrong. It says from 50 to 0.
Right.
CBD to CBD is 10 foot, so it's still 10 foot, so 3 and 4.
Okay.
Will go away.
We're gonna remove both of those variances. And I know Ken, earlier today, I got some language from Tom to try to capture that this was, in that this does not meet the future plan, comprehensive plan, but it has been a use that has been in place for some time with people who have been doing this business for some time, and structures that can't reasonably be moved other than the storage container that has already been removed. I was looking to try to, however we could permit this use and try to contain it within that particular user for this conditional use permit. And there was a previous application, I believe it was in Commissioner LaVente's district, with a mattress manufacturer that we were able to put some parameters around to make sure that they were able to continue their business, but that it would trigger a change if someone else were to come in and try to run that operation. I've torn off how did that language sit with you that Tom provided earlier?
Well, I will say this, it's easier if the applicant agrees to it. So if the applicant would agree to that sort of limiting language on this approval, then you're not going to have any objection from me.
So I'm going to have I've torn it off so we can put it up there, so I'm gonna let you get a chance to
Thank you.
to read it and make sure that it sits well with you. And I'll read it, but you can read along if you'd like. The variances authorized in this approval are specifically based upon the unique operational characteristics of the present occupier of the site, Norshaw Properties LLC. If another entity or another entity or user attempts to locate to the site, then the variances will not likely be appropriate. As such, in order to comply with zoning procedures law, if the present occupier of the site, Norshaw Properties LLC, seeks to relocate from the property or otherwise convey the property to another entity or user, then Norshaw Properties LLC shall have the obligation to notify Forsyth County Planning and Community Development Department of such possible conveyance or relocation, and the county will then be authorized to consider a zoning condition amendment compliant with the zoning procedures law. Moreover, to ensure that any prospective purchaser or user of the site is on notice of this condition, the present owner of the property shall promptly record in the land use records of Forsyth County a chain of title notification advising of this zoning condition requirement. So essentially, this is authorizing your client to use the property exactly as we've discussed. But if they're going to cease using the property, then they're going to have to notify us, because it's not likely that we're going to continue with this type of business in that place due to our comprehensive plan. And if you want some time to think on that, we can bring this back.
And Madam Chair, when I did the one in mine, it did not include whatever variances we gave them stayed.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with the amount of employees, because it was packing the parking lot. So if they ever
Right.
changed their use, I think it moved it back down to, I think, 20 instead of the 40 that they had, because their original zoning capped them at 7.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit different situation, but we're trying to use a similar approach to allow them the flexibility to continue operating, but with knowledge that it's already been, we have a staff non-supportive because it doesn't fit the comp plan, and a planning commission that felt the same. I do feel compassion for them, and this is their life.
A couple
And-
thoughts. Number one, I don't read that condition as saying the variances expire.
Right.
No,
Because
no,
I
no.
don't think
will
we
likely
can.
not be appropriate.
That's right, because I don't think we can do that, because our
Right.
UDC specifically says variances stay. So what this is saying is that if the present owner either seeks to relocate or presumably seeks to put the property up for sale, then they have to notify the county, and presumably any prospective purchaser surveying the title of the property will run across a notification indicating this very language, and then we would have the right under our zoning power to rezone the property consistent with the comp plan. I would feel more comfortable if the applicant is agreeable to that before we impose it. I think it makes a lot of sense, but it makes a whole lot more sense if the applicant understands it, internalizes it, and is comfortable complying.
I agree, and if you need some time with that, then we can go ahead and postpone this decision on this. But
Need some time.
that's fine.
The boatyard has had a business license in front of the hospital for 24 years, and they
Right.
open storage for boat trailers. So when Northside acquired that property, he's moved his business. He wants to move his business to his North Shaw Properties, his brother's property. So North Shaw.
Which is not the property that they're on now, or it is the property they're on now?
Steve Cordell is North Shaw Properties, and the boatyard is Mark Cordell. So if Mark acquires it from Steve after he gets his business license, then it will change hands, but nothing will change on the site. Because we're trying to get the business license for the boatyard, and maybe I've created the problem with the applicant being North Shaw Properties and not the boatyard.
Then if the concern is simply one of it may change technical owner, but use, anticipated use, all of the characteristics would remain the same, Madam Chair, I would still recommend we maybe postpone to allow this individual to speak.
And that's fine.
But I would recommend you bring us back maybe some tweaks because I understand what you're saying. You don't want a technical conveyance to trigger this into live action when it's not having anything substantive on the ground.
Nothing's going to change.
Then I think it would be helpful if maybe he could deliver to us some language that within the parameters of this might address his issue, and then I'll work with you to make sure it satisfies what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's fine. What I want you to bear in mind with this too is we were looking for a way, or I was looking for a way to allow them to continue operating their business in spite of the fact that it does not meet our comprehensive plan. That's something that I think if you ask any person on this board, something I almost never do. But like I said, I know it's been used that way in the past. It was very, very little pushback, if any, to it. But again, if we're looking at the future plan, you know, unfortunately, they bought a piece of property that didn't fit our comprehensive plan for the business they wanted to put there. And so I'm trying to work with you. So if I will shoot that email, that language to you via email. Okay. So you'll have it nice hard copy of it. You can go over it with your property owner, and y'all can get back with me on where you see you need to get comfortable with it, what changes you be.
Because we've had some situations before where there may be a technical change of owner, but it's in effect really the same entity or a very close affiliate. So I can work through that, I think.
Yeah, and I think your clients were a little up in age, so not anticipating that they couldn't have a family member take on the business. It's not of that nature. It's just really trying to make sure that this, it serves the needs that they need to have for it, and that it doesn't continue once the area continues to grow throughout with the comprehensive plan that's in place now, that it still fits. So
any changes from what is on that plan, then it's understood it had to come back.
Right. Well, here's what we'll do. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we bring this back. How much time do you want? You want just punt it another month, or do you? I know you've got some issues with your business license that you can't get, but Tom's sitting right there, and his department does business licenses. So I'm actively working with them to get them through this process. I think you have not. Have they been unable to obtain their business license?
They went to renew their license, and they said, "Oh yeah, we need to change our address," and that threw up the red flags.
I think that's actually what started this whole process rolling. It did. Correct. So I'm working with them to get them there, as far as enforcement on that goes.
And it sounds like we're close. I can't imagine we'll be able to issue the license based on being close, but we could line up all the paperwork, have everything left but the signature, and try to do that Friday morning following the meeting when it actually is approved.
Does that work for you? Do you want me to bring it back on the 7th or the 24th? 24th of this month or 7th of next?
7th of next.
November 7th?
Yeah.
Okay, my motion is to bring this back again as old business on November the 7th.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote. And I will email that to you, if not tonight, tomorrow.
Great.
And you'll have it to work with.
Madam Chair, would you mind copying me on that email? Just so then
absolutely.
he'll have my email address as well.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And when we respond, who should I go
Just
back?
reply all and it'll come to both of us.
Yeah, reply to both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
y'all.
thank you. All right. Brings us to new business. And we already do new business number 1? I think we did.
We still have that.
We still have that. How did
Yes.
that not get moved?
New business number 1, this is AV 190001, located in Commission District number 3. This is a request for a public hearing for Pardeep Vadumili regarding the denial of a rear setback variance of 25 feet to allow the rear setback to be 0 feet instead of the required 25 feet by the Zoning Board of Appeals on September 3rd, 2019. That application at that time that was before them was VA 190027. The property is located on Swindon Way. It's currently zoned Res 3.
Thank you. And this is a little bit a different action that we're looking at this evening, board, in case, I don't know if we've done one of these before with Molly on the board. What they're asking for, the decision tonight is not to approve or deny their actual request, but it's to approve or deny their request to bring this back to us at a future meeting to be heard. Their decision was denied by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and so this is their option to air that one more time before the Board of Commissioners. Ken, would it be appropriate for me to bring the applicant forward right now to give us a brief summation of what
Would be.
he's looking for?
It would be, and as the applicant is walking down, if the applicant is going to walk down, just for purposes of the board, sometimes this gets confusing. So if the board approves going forward with the appeal, you will not have an appeal this evening. It will be on the next regular meeting. I think the 24th is when it would come back. I'll check with Tom on that, but I think it would be the 24th. If you take no action or otherwise deny the appeal, that ends it this evening, and that will be their last appellate review. In other words, this board will basically be saying by denying the appeal that the decision of the ZBA is upheld. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. If you'd like to come forward, state your name, and just give us a brief summation of what it is that you're asking for.
Hi, good evening. I'm Pradeep Ottamilli. I'm the resident at 1755 Swindon Way, Cumming, Georgia. The decision was not to allow the variance of 25 feet to allow rate setback to be 0 feet rather than a required 25 feet. The lot has a sloping rear yard with an overall grade change of approx 6 feet, which is located in the requested variance area, with the slope being steeper towards the southeast corner of the property. Because of the size and grade of the slope, considering safety for the kids and adults, a construction of deck is surrounded by the fence is recommended and would be no benefit to the applicant. So,
Okay. Do you not have an existing deck on your home?
Not yet. This is not tied to the property. This is a freestanding deck.
A freestanding deck. Is there currently an attached deck
No.
to your home?
No.
There's not? Or any type of a patio? There's no type of outdoor area that's
Nothing.
attached to the home?
No.
And I wish Commissioner Levent he may have stepped out for the rest of the meeting. I know he was going to have to leave early. Have you been in contact with your neighbors? Were they supportive of your request?
Yeah. I contacted my neighbor, both the neighbors. They are okay with that.
And when you say both, you mean the sides? Did you also do you have a rear-facing neighbor as well? Did you contact all adjoining property owners?
I mean the side neighbors on the front I didn't contact. But
Did they provide a written?
Not yet I can get it, but they said they can give a written approval actually. No one. It's a woods actually.
Do you have an active HOA in your neighborhood?
Yeah, there is an HOA.
There is an HOA. Have you gone before your HOA in order to
Not
have this
yet.
approved?
Not yet.
You have not.
Yep.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Cooper, do you have any other questions?
My only question would be, if you have an HOA and you have not gone before them, but you have gone before the Board of Appeals on this, maybe, Ken, you could help me out with the steps on this. What is appropriate when the HOA, because do you know what the HOA requirements are? I mean, if you haven't gone before them, can you give us any information of the HOA requirements in regard to the county requirements? And do we have a conflict here? Are we potentially having a conflict?
That is a reasonable question, and so I don't know personally what the record was before. Did this come up before the ZBA, the HOA's requirements? Was that an issue at all?
I contacted HOA. They said first we need to sort out the variance. Then they said they would get approval.
Okay, so that's interesting. He said that the HOA basically advised that look, you need to sort out the variance first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Commissioner Cooper, what I can tell you is when you look at the Unified Development Code, it anticipates that a review will be granted if there is a procedural or substantive error which has materially prejudiced the rights of the applicant before the ZBA, which would be this gentleman. So that's if he has been materially prejudiced because of either a substantive error, which would be an error in basically interpreting the code or interpreting the law, or a procedural error, which I don't think he's raising a procedural error. I think it's more of a substantive error. Or if there are substantial costs laid upon the applicant, again, this gentleman, before the ZBA by reason of the denial of the application. That might be his argument. Again, I'm not trying to make his arguments for you. What I'm trying to do is show you sort of the things the board is supposed to consider. If the board wanted to grant the review, that would certainly be appropriate. That does not mean you're granting the appeal. It means you're granting a review. And then at that review, you could then direct this gentleman to maybe bring back some additional information that you might want to see in addition to considering the record before the ZBA.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Tom. Do we typically allow these types of structures to be built on a residential lot anywhere? I mean, I know typically the decks are attached to the home, and it does appear from the photographs that are submitted that there is actually a patio.
Yeah, variance issues aside, yes, we would allow someone to permit a standalone deck.
I mean, if we grant letting it be heard, that's not granting, that's not okaying it.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
It's just allowing it to be heard, so maybe Todd will be here.
That is correct as well. Right.
I don't have a problem doing that.
In reviewing the code again, I may have misspoke. What it says is if you grant the review, it's supposed to go to the next public hearing calendar. Mr. Brown, that might be November 7th.
I was going to mention, I prefer November 7th.
You just need a motion to that effect.
Right. The motion would be that the Board of Commissioners is going to grant the review and place this on the November 7th hearing calendar.
So moved.
We have a motion, a second. Please vote. And with a vote of 4-0, this will appear on our November the 7th. Will it be a public hearing or will it be old business?
The code is fairly specific. It's going to be in the nature more of one of our administrative hearings.
Administrative
as who
hearing?
gets to speak. Correct. But Madam Chair, it is not a full-bore public hearing.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Our next item is new business number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What you have before you tonight is an offer from Georgia Department of Transportation for the acquisition of 0.324 acres of property the county currently owns at the site that we typically call the surplus barn. This is on Canton Highway. DOT needs this for the widening project that they are undertaking on Canton Highway. In addition to the right-of-way, there are some improvements they are paying us for and the replacement of an existing fence line. The total that they are offering the county, actually, let me break that down. They are offering the county $48,600 for 0.32 acres of land. They're offering $2,650 for some various improvements. And then they're offering $47,898 for fencing across the front of the property. The total is $99,200 is the total offer from the Georgia Department of Transportation. And if the board is so inclined and approves this, then it would also provide for the chairman to execute any documents necessary.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? And this is North Corners Parkway. I'm not familiar with that particular road to 371. Do you know where that particular marker is? No. Does anybody have any questions for Tim? Or would anyone like to offer a motion? I will make a motion that we approve GDOT's offer of $99,200 for 0.324 acres of right-of-way site improvements and fencing costs related to County Parcel 125-030, also known as 834 Canton Highway, with also the approval for the chairman to execute documents related to that transaction.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 4-0. Thank you. Number 3.
Madam Chair, members of the board, item number 3 is the proposed annexation that is in Commissioner Cooper's district. This is an item that we discussed at the September 24th work session. I have the exact same PowerPoint if the board wants to go over it. I don't know that I need to go through all of it, but I do at least want to show you again just the property at issue. This is on Canton Highway. This is to the west of Canton Highway, as is our typical protocol. The yellow is in fact the municipal limits, but let me go ahead and show you the next slide. Portions of the property to be annexed are already within portions of the city limits, so that's a little curious. Here is where the proposed annexation would in fact cross over Highway 20, and as I mentioned to you during the original presentation, that does not mean the city would own portions of the state route. But as you can see, it is in fact the area in red that is the proposed area to be annexed into the city of Cumming. I think we made a specific point at the work session to show how this blends in to the city's proposed city center. And I believe the blue outline will show you part of the city center. So I think there is an effort there at providing for the city center and this development to be, if not part of the same development, to be at least closely affiliated. Going through additional slides. Yeah, there's the proposed city center in yellow. I think that's a better depiction for the gallery and for the record. And again, the red is the outline of the property that is in for annexation. We took this candidly out of the Forsyth County News, this graphic, and then like I did at the work session, if I go back a slide, I can then show you that the yellow and the slide sort of go hand in glove together. So the current zoning of the parcels to be annexed are a mixture of A1 and R1. The proposed zoning itself would be the city's PUD or PUD zoning. No water and sewer impact. The county's comp plan notes that the subject property is located within the campground character area, but not within a node. The comp plan does not consider a mixed-use designation as necessarily an appropriate zoning classification in the campground character area, but the plan does indicate that a higher density may be appropriate along State Route 20. The plan also contemplates a low-intensity mixed-use community node along State Route 20, though these properties are not within that node. It is further west. The proposed density is 7.03 units per acre. The county's maximum allowable density is slightly lower at 6 units per acre. You all know the standards for objection, so I won't go over those, just summarily stating that our typical and strongest basis for objection is a substantial change in the land use or intensity of the proposed use, typically accompanied by also attendant costs of delivery of infrastructure or services. And there's sort of where we've sort of focused in on the various legal standards. And our objection, if any, is due by October 10th. If we did in fact delay the decision till the work session on the 8th, we might be able to do that, but it would be close because we have to get those objections in by certified mail. If the commissioner is in a position to make a decision tonight, that would be optimal, but not necessarily mandatory. Madam Chair.
Thank you. I know that Commissioner Cooper has been working with the property owner to try to come up with some acceptable conditions to move forward with. So I'm going to defer to my counterpart to the west.
Thank you. Yes. Emery, if you would be so kind as to come up. Emery is representing the property owner on this. And what we have done, I have talked with the property owner and wanted to put in some of the conditions because as it stands right now, it is my understanding that this will be a PUD under city zoning if it goes, correct? And under city requirements, with the PUD, they have absolutely no buffer requirements for landscaping at all. They have no buffer requirements, no landscaping requirements. Therefore, going along Highway 20, what we're trying to do is we are trying to embrace the environmental and aesthetic look on our roadways and our streets. And that is something I was in hopes that the property owner on this would work with us and would do a 50-foot buffer on that, which is on the north side, the property that if you're traveling to Cherokee County, it is on the right side of the road, and on the north side of that tract, that they would do a 50-foot buffer up against the adjoining property owner with a fence. Another one was that they would do a 20-foot landscape all along on both sides of 20 that they are wanting to develop. And that it would include, this is from our requirement, what we have in the county, the following elements: vegetative ground cover, herbaceous, ornamental, or low-level shrubs, with a combination of canopy trees with understory trees or large shrubs. And that a third of the planting shall be evergreen. So that was the two conditions that we were trying to get in. It was, again, trying to maintain some sort of consistency in looks, improvement of our aesthetics and our environment going on our roadways and our streets. That is something that on Highway 20 we have not had in the past, and we really need to emphasize this and try to make this as part of our future. Is there anyone that really wants to go down the highways and seeing stuff butted up with there's absolutely no requirements for anything, no limits? So what this sort of looks like to me is we also do not have grounds that Counselor went over for the objection. If we tried to object on this, it's so weak for us because it does not infringe upon the road infrastructure. That's a state road. It's being widened. Also, now I must admit that the property owner did agree to work with GDOT on this, and that the completion of this development would coincide with the completion of the widening of Highway 20, right there at that intersection. And with that, it would have the capacity to be able to handle the additional traffic, with additional units being on there. That being said, I could not get the landscaping cooperation with the 20-foot buffer along the roads, nor for the 50-foot buffer along the north side on the north side property line. So with that, it's hard for me to say, yeah, I support this, but I don't have anything to object with either on those grounds that, because quite frankly, we are limited from the state, if it's my understanding that that is where it comes from, as to what we can stand on with an objection. And I don't like wasting the taxpayers' money with going through some sort of process that is nothing but going through the motions. And it would cost the county money to do it, and we have nothing to stand on. So with that, also I would like to ask my fellow board members if you have any input on this and how you feel about it. This is something that keeps coming up with us on these annexations. And again, if we could get together with the city on some of this landscaping requirements on these roads, and the city and the county both having the natural look as well as the aesthetics of our community as a whole being a priority for both the city and the county, then this would work more smoothly.
I guess I have one question for Ken. In the past, we've had one item that we just decided not to act because we were not satisfied with where we were with it. would it be appropriate for us to send a conditional non-objection? That is, to roll into that non-objection letter the conditions that Commissioner Cooper has worked to come to agreement with the applicant, and saying, in light of the agreement, I think would it be appropriate for us to communicate those items, capture those in that letter?
Right. So, first of all, if the board's direction is for me to draft a letter to the city that says the county is not formally objecting, but would request that the city of Cumming contemplate adding these requirements to the property when it comes in for zoning, when it's in front of the city, I'm happy to do that. And I'm sure those would be well received by the city. But I will say, but I will say, we're sort of we have a binary process. We either start the objection process or we don't.
Right.
So if I write that letter and say, we're not going to object, we'd ask these conditions be added, that's a non-objection. But we would be then anticipating that there would hopefully be some goodwill. I mean, the buffer requirements you're talking about are not unreasonable or onerous.
They're not unreasonable
these
at all.
these are very practical, pragmatic sorts of aesthetic considerations. So I would hope that if we do that, it would be seen as an act and sign of goodwill, and that it would be well received. That's the best I've got for you, Madam Chair.
A comment.
Yes.
Dennis and I just completed a class yesterday on effective county government.
I love this, yes.
And we were sitting at a table with, I don't know if was he a county manager? Chairman. He was the chairman of Floyd County, and he was surprised that we were having problems with annexation because they don't have a problem with Rome, because they adopt their comp plan together, a joint land use map. And so when annexations come along, they work together. And so they have similar design standards, they have similar, so there's continuity.
Well, that's always been the issue, right, is that people are, you will go somewhere else to get what you need.
Well, and
So-
for us, the city for a PUD, nothing. And for us, we have the Beaufort Highway overlay. And again, that which we are asking for, I don't feel like it's unreasonable. And it would be wonderful if we could pull together on making Highway 20, because the city center is going to be right there. But
I go back to the meeting you and I were trying to have with the city when the ambush occurred, the overtaking, and when they had turned it into their own meeting in our building instead of the meeting we were wanting to have. But we were going to that day discuss, where we have overlays, that maybe they would at least acknowledge our overlay, so there would be the continuity. So there would be, there's a way to do this and do it getting along better and to respect each other.
Both parties have to be
and
willing.
as well as, I know that we always listen to the adjoining property owners when a development comes before us. And with this adjoining property owner on the north side of 20 there, asking for a 50-foot buffer with the fence, it's not at all unreasonable. Because this is going to be a very large development right there at theirs. Yet, again, from the city's standpoint, there's nothing.
Well, and we know that in approving this, you're opening it up to the next property, and the next property, and
Exactly.
the next property.
Exactly, and that's why this is very tough. It would be wonderful if we could have, with the property owner, if we could have, if that property owner would have agreed. Emery, since he is your client, if we push this back to the next work session, do you think some more conversation and clarity on this would be helpful or productive?
I don't want to promise something about that. My client believes that this is not something that is best dealt with a condition going forward to the city of Cumming. He believes that the city of Cumming ought to make the determination of it. He's assured me that he intends to deal with the neighbor there and to make every effort to work that out. but, you know, I'm not here with any authority to agree to that. He feels strongly that this is not best handled by condition coming from the county to the city.
But we put
this
that on
would
a
be that
different one,
way.
didn't we, Emery? I mean, didn't we, Ken? There was another one that we put a condition on.
Well, we did, but that was one, that was within that year. And they had to get our permission to change the zoning. We worked out a deal with the property owner, but remember, we sent that to the city in the form of an agreement, and the city never ratified it. And the reason was because, candidly, I believe the clock ran out. I mean, the year kind of came and went, and the city's position, I believe, I don't want to put words in their mouth, was we don't need to do the agreement because the year's about to expire, and we don't need your permission after a year.
But it was that one that was
That's
Northside
right.
Hospital.
That's it. That's correct.
Yeah, I
Your
remember
memory
that
is
one.
right.
So on this one, I would like to try to have some more conversation with the landowner and see if we can get anywhere with it. To me, these conditions are important. And don't know that we will, but you said, Ken, if we kick it down to the next work session, that's getting close on the timeline, but it could still be, the response can still be done, right?
Let me, and if you don't mind, just forgive me for the... Yes, ma'am. We had 2 days built in. So yes, so October 8th is fine. I will need a final decision for you then. We'll kick the letter out October 10th. So yes, we can postpone it till the work session.
Maybe you could reach out to the city.
Yeah, and reach out to the city as well.
Talk to them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So do you want to formalize that in a motion to bring it back on October 8th? As time-sensitive business?
Well, right, yeah, it will have to take time-sensitive action on the 8th. Yes, ma'am.
I move that for the annexation of property 14905 Hopewell Group LLC, tax map parcel C01-009, C06-001, C06-013, C06-015, C06-030, C06-031, and CO2-008, that we will discuss the annexation. Decision would be made the work session of October the 8th.
On a time-sensitive basis?
On a time-sensitive basis.
Second. We have a motion and a second, please vote. And that will be a time-sensitive item on our October 8th agenda with a vote of 4-0. Number 4.
Madam Chair, board members, item number 4 is consideration and possible approval of a conservation easement for the Woodland Reserve subdivision between Forsyth County, Meritage Homes of Georgia, and Woodland Reserve Homeowners Association. A copy of the conservation easement is in your agenda packet. This is not unlike what we did recently with Parkstone, where we are approving an easement that will inure to the benefit of the county, but we have the right but not the obligation to take enforcement action. At the work session, the question was raised, and it was a good one. First of all, what is the easement area that is being protected? I will tell you, board members, this was not a conservation subdivision. This was an older zoning that had a condition that said that the open space had to be protected in this way. I will tell you that is not a terribly impressive open space or conservation area. It's just, so the yellow is what, that was the question that was raised. It was a great question at the work session. What is it we're wrapping this easement around? Well, it's the open space areas driven by the zoning, and that's it in yellow on your screen. So that's it. The reason we're holding it is that no, as my understanding, information I learned today is that no conservancy even wanted it. So the reason that's the reason we're going to be the sort of the beneficiary, if you will, is because we have the capacity to accept and be the beneficiary of the easement, and we're the only ones that really wanted it, and the zoning condition requires it. And so that's why we're doing it. There should be another slide that shows the area, that shows just the area of the subdivision. I just wanted you all to see. Okay, so this is in Commissioner Simonson's district, and the red sunshine-looking dot is actually Eccles, right off Eccles Road. in Commissioner Simonson's district. So this is Commissioner Simonson, or a subdivision in Commissioner Simonson's district. I think it's called Woodland Reserve is the name of the subdivision. And now, if you don't mind going back to the subdivision footprint itself. And the areas in yellow is what will be protected by the easement. Madam Chair, that's it. There's nothing terribly unusual about the conservation agreement itself. Again, it's a right we have, but not an obligation. No one can
Not
make
an
us.
ownership, but an
Right.
easement. And so effectively, that means we would be notified, and if anybody tried to disturb that theoretically.
This will be complaint driven.
And we'd have the, right.
That's right.
Okay, well, I would like to make a motion then that we approve the conservation easement agreement for the Woodland Reserve. I think that's it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion carries with a vote of 4-0. Number 5.
Madam Chair, just one moment on number 5, please. Just 90 seconds.
Okay.
Board members, thank you very much. Yeah, item number 5 on the published agenda is a settlement agreement between Forsyth County, the Board of Commissioners, and all of our requisite officers and employees, and Timothy Smallwood. This is litigation that has been ongoing for some time. This is a piece of litigation that the Board of Commissioners has discussed in executive session. This was the product of authority provided at a July 2019 executive session that resulted in mediation. The authority that was provided by the Board of Commissioners was authority to settle this case for up to $250,000. Of that amount, $200,000 would be coming by the county's insurance carrier. Forsyth County's obligation would be $50,000. The case was in fact mediated. Compromise was achieved. This settlement agreement and general release is in fact the product of that mediation. And based upon the direction given by the Board of Commissioners, it is my recommendation that the Board of Commissioners approve a settlement agreement and general release between Forsyth County and Timothy Smallwood. Madam Chair.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of the board?
We approve as briefed by council.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries with a vote of 4-0. And we do have item number 6, which came over from consent.
Board members, item number 6 was moved off of the consent agenda. It was direction by the board with respect to which regional entity that the county would begin to and request that we be under, whether it's ARC or Georgia Mountains. I believe the board may have received some feedback, maybe from local officials, questioning this decision and this ask. And I think the Board of Commissioners just had an interest in perhaps discussing it a bit further and seeing whether all of the requisite players or stakeholders or interested parties are in fact on the same page with the board. Madam Chair, that's really about all I know about that.
Thank you. I know that Cindy also was contacted. I spoke to one of the councilmen. Actually, I spoke to Jason Evans. He wasn't necessarily oppositional to this change. He was questioning our reasoning for it, and I think he was, at the end of our conversation, was satisfied with the reasoning that I gave him, which was, you know, this county essentially is 1 foot in, 1 foot out with respect to ARC, and my observations over working with actually both organizations over the course of the last 9 months has, you know, really kind of brought to light that we have 2 core reasons really for looking at making a change in the regional commission that we're using. One of them is going to be basically the affinity with the other counties that are within those regional commissions. You know, I don't think that most people would consider the types of issues that we struggle with here in Forsyth County to be similar to those in White County or Habersham County. They're lovely communities. but I don't think that they struggle with the same issues that we do. And definitely our neighbors in Cherokee, Gwinnett, Fulton, those really are the communities that we are on the edge of, and the growth and the issues that they've seen over the past years are certainly headed our way, and in some respects are already here. So I think from that standpoint, just having a regional commission that is in tune with the types of issues that our county is dealing with was one driving reason. Additionally, as I said, we're already 1 foot in with respect to transportation and water quality. So we already deal with them with those. And then really kind of the last one was that, we find ourselves in this county having a pretty robust staff to be able to work on projects. We've pulled in consultants when we've needed to the point that even I take a look at our GIS department as one example, that the type of reporting and mapping that we get from our own GIS department is actually superior to that which we get from GMRC. So I think that when we're looking at a regional commission and what they can bring to us, what they can bring to the table with respect to research capabilities, being able to act on projects, giving us a little bit more depth of resource to augment our own staff or to handle special projects for us, that ARC really has more bandwidth, has more depth, and has more capability to handle those types of projects than GMRC does. So I think once I explained those, and the cost of joining one versus the other is no different, is based solely on our population. I know that one of the concerns I think that some of us held at one point was, do we really see ourselves as, we're the big fish in the small pond up in GMRC, and we would be a smaller fish in ARC. But I have found in my personal experience that they've been very responsive, at least on the transportation issues that I've worked with them. I don't feel like that would be a negative at all. Additionally, there was another concern that there might be some pressures to take on more urbanization types of things that you would look for from the city of Atlanta, some of the more in-town communities. And there's really no mandate that we take on any of those qualities whatsoever. So it's really just a matter of having a better resource for us and more communication and working directly with the neighbors that we more regularly interact with. Our neighbors, directly to the east and west and to the south.
I wanted it, though I thought we needed to have this conversation, because I don't want our legislative body to think that if we're going forward and asking them to the next step, that we're at odds with the city over it. I wanted, which Jason expressed the same thing to me, he wanted to know why. And I want to make sure that we have a clear dialogue with the city, that we're not at odds. I know we're at odds on lots of things, but that we're not at odds on it, because I'm fearful that the delegation might not be, as apt to move forward with it if they think that we're at odds over it. I think that with so many legislative issues where they're trying to take away home rule, or they're trying to override us, that we do have so much more, and that's not meaning our own delegation, that's meaning others, that we do have so much in common with these other counties and cities that are facing these population growth issues that we are facing, and that being able to go to ARC for research that Kevin Tanner himself said he goes to them for, is paramount for us to be able to have that, and as well as being able to compete to get transportation dollars. I think that's, and I express both those things.
And they work very closely with GDOT.
They do.
My question, and I respect everything you both said, but just to play devil's advocate, would there be any detriment for going with ARC? Is there any negative that you see, or is it really advantageous on every point?
I don't see it.
I think I've been able to dispel every preconception that I might have had with respect to any types of more urban versus rural agendas or anything along those lines. I really, I don't really see one other than, certainly there are probably, people have probably formed personal relationships with people from other communities that we've been involved with over the years. That doesn't necessarily mean that all goes away. But from a planning perspective, I think we really have to look to the issues that we're challenged with here in Forsyth County, and they align more with the metro than they do with the mountains.
Yeah, and we are definitely, that commonality that we had with, like you'd mentioned, White County, Habersham County, is of the past. And we're not going to shrink. We're not going to be going backwards at any point.
No, and we're dealing with those issues that we can learn from some of those others that have made mistakes.
Before. Mm-hmm.
Only thing I would add, Madam Chair and board members, is there were joint meetings of the city of Cumming and Forsyth County on January 31st, I believe, of 2019, and maybe April 15th of 2019, where we had presentations by all of these entities, just for the public to know.
And it was stated in those meetings that we do pay for both. I think, Eric,
yes,
you
and
made
commissioners,
that.
I think you had some feedback that once they kind of understood that we're paying as the entity, the county entity, for the participation of both the county and the city, I think at least a couple of the members of the city delegation that day basically said that, well, then they didn't really have an opinion. We were paying for them. But and I know the individual you mentioned was here, but then again, obviously it wasn't clear when each of those organizations came in where we were going. But I'd hoped we'd have an opportunity to talk with the city a little bit about that issue, and we just haven't had that opportunity. But
where do we go? I mean, from here, do we need to?
Well, we could notify the city of our action. I don't know that your resolution is binding on the city, but we could advise them of our intent to move forward and talk to the delegation about whether they think this is the year that they can make things move, or whether they want to sound it out. My fear is that some of the members of the delegation for those other counties in GMRC may realize that the impact of losing our contribution to GMRC will have implications, although they do have a variety of funding sources, as they pointed out when they were here. So it's not that, it's material, but it's not overwhelming in terms of the impact. And Tim can talk about the fact that he reached out today to GMRC to let them know about tonight's discussion. And I think that was a great idea and appropriate.
I did contact Heather Feldman and just made her aware that we were having this discussion tonight, and it was up to the board to decide how they wanted to move forward. And the motion was before you was to move toward the ARC and away from GMRC. So I did contact them to let them know that you were contemplating this action tonight.
And they've known. They've known that we've been debating it and talking about it. And so should we put it on a work session, or should we?
Well, you were teed up this evening for this to be on consent. So unless there's more to vet, you could just go ahead and take the action now that you were going to take at the beginning of the meeting.
We could follow up with the city to advise them of the board's position, and of course the city could ask the board to not take action yet if they had concerns. But again, we had them here for both meetings, and we haven't really heard anything since from them in terms of concerns. I took that to mean that they were kind of acquiescing to.
I tried to go back and watch those meetings, which
they were a little painful.
Well, and I was really tired too, and I was at the end of class, but I do think that we left the end of one of them that we would get back with them when we made a decision.
Then perhaps the work session is where this needs to land to at least, okay.
I think either way, we need to have a direct communication with them and let them advise them of our decision, or at least our direction if we have not finalized that. And so I think it would be appropriate for us to put this
postpone a final.
To postpone
Tuesday.
the final action on it until the work session. And in the meantime, if we can go ahead and develop a letter to communicate that is our intent, and get that to the city. If somebody wants to sit down and meet with me or with, two of us, or with any particular commissioner on that, in the interim, we can facilitate that.
Would you mind calling Troy
I wouldn't mind
yourself?
calling, I'll call Troy myself.
If you'll
I'll
call him tomorrow or
and
something?
give him a heads up. I mean, of course, they may know right now.
Yeah, but if you would call him.
I will give him a call and let him know that that's what our intention is and that we did pull back on it a little bit just to make sure we could have that conversation and dispel any lingering concerns that they might have with it.
Could I
Be great.
respectfully propose then that if you're going to postpone it perhaps to the 22nd work session, the 8th is going to be here before we.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only urgency was we wanted to get this out before we went, got too far along. We wanted to have it ready for the next session, so we're still fine for that. So the motion is going to be to bring this back for final action on the 22nd
Work session.
work session. That's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that motion carries with a vote of 4-0.
And Eric is going to send a letter, and you are going to call Troy.
Yes.
Yes, I'll prepare a letter and I'll have the chair review it. I think I'm going to go back to what you just said on the record. I think that covered all the items.
Alrighty. We already dealt with number 7 on new business. We already dealt with our administrative hearing. So the question is, Ken, Gerard, is there a need for executive session?
There is not, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting of public hearings? We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And with a vote of 4-0, we are adjourned at 8:07 p.m.
This is TV Forsyth, your county connection.